Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 2 of our story. If you like this WhatIf story and want to see part 3, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗘 on Wattpad. Now let's start. 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗘's POV. It's been 19 hours since the end of the simulation and 𝗧𝗬 still hasn't woken up. My hunt last night was very fruitful. 𝗧𝗱 came with me and was asking things about what I am, and when I didn't answer him he started taking shots in the dark suggesting I was some form of failed a project that was thrown away or some form of government experiment. He kept trying to get information out of me. It didn't bother me as I just drowned him out with the victims of my hunt's screams. Eventually I snapped at him to stop fishing for information about me when he tried to bring up my precious izuku and tried to pry into his past. I stated if he didn't drop all the questions I'd leave him on a skyscraper with no way down. I think he could tell I was serious by my tone of voice because he stopped asking about me and my little sister 𝗧𝗬 and asked why izuku showed Bakugo such a graphic scene involving his parents. I thought back to my answer. Flashback: I just landed next to 𝗧𝗱 on a roof after threatening him as I looked for my 11th victim of the night when he asked right as I was about to take off after my prey, why did izuku show Bakugo such a violent scene with his parents? The psychological consequences could cause Bakugo to have serious issues in the future. This question made me halt in place as I turned my head to look at him over my shoulder. What 𝗧𝗬 caused that ℕT stain doesn't concern me. I'm proud of what my sister did today. After 10 years of thinking that 𝗧𝗑𝗧𝗟𝗘 is some form of god, I'm glad he's had his ego knocked down a few pegs. He deserves everything that's coming to him, and that was just the start. He has 10 years of 𝗧𝗟𝗘 to repay to my sweet 𝗧𝗬, and he will get every second of it. End of discussion. With that I took off after the prey and filled our reserves a little. His quirk was nothing fancy, just a basic wind quirk which did nothing but break the skin with wind blades before they healed. Flashback over. I sighed as I checked our assimilation meter, which sat comfortably at 879% per 1000%. Izuku still hasn't woken up and I'm getting worried. This was the 5th time I scanned his code/body and found nothing abnormal. I checked our internal clock and saw it was 8:37 a.m. Perks of being a drone is that we only need to do a 1-hour system check once a day instead of sleeping. A lot of drones went into a full 8-hour sleep cycle to do a thorough system check and memory backup, but since me and 𝗧𝗍 share a core, as long as one of us sleep 8 hours, the other doesn't need to do a full systemic memory backup and thorough system check. I suddenly felt my control over our body slip as I heard a groan in my mind. 𝗧𝗍 is awake. Izuku's POV. I had this banging headache. It felt like someone was trying to tear my head apart when I heard 𝗬𝗏 scream in my mind, 𝗧𝗍, are you alright? I groaned louder and held my head as I responded, my head feels like it's been blown apart with a missile. I felt her wince as she spoke more softly, sorry 𝗧𝗍, what do you remember about yesterday? I rubbed my head and sighed as I talked back to her, not much. I chased Bakugo after creating that hologram of his parents being ripped apart when he jumped out and babbled on about his gauntlets before everything went black. Hearing you shout out to me. 𝗬𝗓, what happened afterwards? Did we lose? 𝗬𝗏 giggled at me, being more concerned over losing the simulation before she responded after appearing next to me, nah, we won. We got it, but you were unconscious for the past 19 hours. After you got blasted and knocked out I took over, and I may or may not have reminded him with a hologram of the day we met 6 years ago, which everyone saw. I was rooted in place before I shrieked out, what? 𝗬𝗏 winced and looked down as she apologized. I'm sorry 𝗧𝗍, I didn't mean to. I was just so angry that he thought he killed you again with that attack. I could tell she was clearly upset about it as she was looking down at her skirt and playing with her fingers, which was always her tell for when she's upset. I sighed and rubbed my temples. It's fine sis, I forgive you. I could never be angry with you. What's happened due to the reveal? She looked up and smiled at me, accepting her apology before she grinned a little before her grin dropped again and she hesitated before answering. Well, the class looked sorry for us, I think. I'm not good at reading emotions of other people. But the staff want a meeting with us regarding our pasts. I sighed as I got up. It was bound to happen eventually. I just wished it wouldn't happen so soon. Let's get it over with then. What else happened after the lesson? I put the hero dress back on and started making my way to the common room as my sister walked next to me. Well, we have to take our hero dress to the support department to get it fixed properly. I also went out on a hunt last night to recover our reserves since that 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗟𝗘 made us lose like 250% of our meter. I nodded as we entered the common room and found 13 sat there focused on watching the TV report about some villain attack in Tokyo, so I sat next to her. 𝗧𝗓𝗧 sat next to me. "Hi 13, she jumped and turned to me before talking. "Izuku, you're alright." I nodded and confirmed I'm alright and made a few 𝗔𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘 around us which allowed her to remove her helmet and gloves. She looked on the verge of tears as she spoke. I saw your fight yesterday and the hologram scene made. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything you went through if that was the tip of the iceberg." She hugged me which made me tense up before she pulled away and looked to 𝗧𝗓𝗧. "I don't know what you are seeing, but you saved izuku that day and rescued him. I don't care what others say about you, but you are a hero for that. So thank you for saving izuku. Thank you both for allowing me the opportunity to see the world with my own eyes and experience life outside my suit. I'll defend you in the meeting later no matter what." I nodded and thanked her as we moved to less depressing topics and spoke for half an hour before she asked if we had any plans for today. "Well, after the meeting we have to stop by the support department to make sure my hero dress is properly fixed after yesterday. I've been hearing there's some sort of crazy pink-haired goblin in there though." That got 13 to laugh as she responded. "No, she's not a goblin, just overly excited about inventing." I looked at her with hesitance before sighing. As I went to ask about the goblin inventor, 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗏 walked in looking more exhausted than usual, which gained my focus. "𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗏, you look exhausted. What happened?" He looked surprised to see me before answering. "Your sister dragged me around on a full night hunt and threatened me." I turned to 𝗧𝗓 with a curious look, who shrugged her shoulders. "He deserved it. He kept trying to dig into our past when he knew he would be getting some answers today." I sighed and turned back to 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗏. "Sorry 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗏, but you did kinda deserve it for trying to dig into our past knowing you'd be getting some answers today." He sighed and simply asked, "Anyway, how are you doing?" "Izuku in said you were unconscious, so you'd probably be best going to Recovery Girl to make sure you're not concussed and for a general checkup." Me and 𝗧𝗓𝗏 both screamed, "No. No," which took both 13 and 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗏 by surprise as we composed ourselves, and I sighed and rubbed my temples. "Look, me and 𝗧𝗓𝗏 aren't going to any form of doctor, and you'll find out why later. With that said, can we just go to this 𝗏𝗡 interrogation already? Me and 𝗬𝗏 need to go to the support department afterwards. And we don't know how long that could take." 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗏 sighed and grabbed a jug of coffee before telling us to follow him, which resulted in me, 𝗬𝗏, and 13 following him as me and 13 continued our conversation from before. Eventually we got to a room with a single desk opposite a series of desks arranged in a reverse U. 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗏 told us to wait here as he went and got the others. Me and 13 eventually claimed some seats as 𝗬𝗏 found a comfy spot laying on the lone desk as she nodded off. Around 20 minutes later all the staff walked in. The majority looked confused, whereas All Might, 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗏, Nizu and 13 all knew why they were there. I walked up to 𝗧𝗏 and spoke to him. "Hey 𝗧𝗏, Eve got a question. You see, part of my hero costume involves the use of a 8-round revolver to cover my long-range weakness, so I was wondering if you could help me with my accuracy since I heard off the grapevine that you have a private target range to practice." The other heroes were confused on why I had a gun as part of my hero costume until they heard me say about my long-range weakness. 𝗧𝗏 looked at me for a moment before giving his answer. "If you know basic gun safety, how and when to use a gun and how to clean your gun properly, then I see no issue in helping you with accuracy training. Handling a gun as a hero is dangerous. Many heroes aren't immune to gunfire like the public think and have always been a source of danger. As long as you understand this and know the basics of understanding gun safety, it'll teach you more advanced stuff that you can't find online and in books." I nodded in thanks and went to talk when a man I've never seen at UA walked in. 𝗓𝗏 must have felt my distress and slight curiosity at the man in our core because she shot up from her nap and scanned the guy before running him through our database connected to a few federal databases, and she found our answer as I looked over at her. "His name is 𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏. He's a detective with a lie detector quirk. His case solve rate is basically 100%. I looked back to him as he went and spoke with Nizu before they both turned to me, and with my guard still up I sat back down after Nizu told me to before he spoke to everyone. "Everyone, I'm sure you're wondering why you're all here and who this man is. He was cut off by 𝗓𝗏. That man is Detective 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 and he's here to determine if what we say is the truth. The man looked shocked as he spoke up. That's all true. How did you know that? Me and 𝗓𝗏 stayed quiet as 𝗧𝗏 spoke back up. As Miss Elliot said, this is Detective 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 and he will be here as a favor to All Might to determine what 𝗏𝗏𝗧 and Mr./Miss Elliot is the truth. Me and 𝗓𝗏 narrowed our eyes at the unsaid accusations. We stayed quiet as he kept talking about how 𝗓𝗏 revealed that Bakugo did in fact kill me and then played the clip where 𝗓𝗏 made the hologram of the day 6 years ago right up to the point where 𝗓𝗏 appeared and tore into my chest after the deal. I watched with once the recording ended everyone turned to look at me with sorry eyes. The most noticeable look was coming from Recovery Girl who looked sorry for me and slightly glaring at 𝗓𝗏. We both shot her a glare back making her speak up. Listen Sonny, while I understand what happened that doesn't excuse what that thing next to you did. We don't know what that thing has even done to your body. A hero would have come by eventually and taken you to a hospital. I snapped and stood up abruptly. What my sister did back then saved me. And in terms of the heroes coming to save me, where were they then? 𝗓𝗏 put her hand on my shoulder and guided me back to my seat. 𝗧𝗏 took that moment to speak. Let's move on to this. For the purpose of this, the detective will be asking the questions so his quirk will work effectively. Is that all right, Elliot's? I nodded and the detective started asking, all right, let's cover the basics. Is your name izuku Elliot née Midoriya and 𝗓𝗏 Elliot? We confirmed it, truth and truth. Next question, while you claim to be siblings, there's no actual relation, is there? We responded that we are actually related and smirked at their shocked expression as he said, the truth. 𝗧𝗏 was the next to speak. How are you two related if one of you is some sort of machine? We just smirked at him and kept silent. He narrowed his eyes at us but moved on as he spoke to the detective before the detective spoke up. If you two are actual siblings now, then what exactly are you, Ms. Elliot? 𝗏𝗏 smirked as she looked directly at him as she sent me a shared thought that made me giggle a little as she spoke. I'm not human or made by any of your kind. The look of sheer terror was priceless. Once the detective responded, truth, there was an uproar of outrage from everyone but Shota, 𝗧𝗏 and 13 as me and 𝗧𝗏 just giggled and shook our heads in amusement till All Might banged his fist silencing everyone as the detective spoke again. So you're not human or some form of human creation. Then what and who are you really, Ms. Elliot? 𝗓𝗏 answered with a giggle as she gave them a small hint. I am who I am who was, and I am who I will always be. But in all seriousness, I was made. Just not made on this earth. We could see 𝗧𝗏 chuckle a little at her response as it clicked for him, making him talk to the detective who looked confused as he turned back to us and asked, are you from another planet or another dimension? That got us smirking like crazy as I spoke up. She is not from this dimension, but I am. Although I'm not human I suppose. I put my hand on my chin in mock thoughtfulness as I turned to my sister. Would I technically no longer be from this earth, sis? As 𝗓𝗏 confirmed, my human body is still of this earth, my mind and drone body is no longer of this earth. As the detective took a step back and whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear, truth, it was all the truth. Cue the screaming match as once again just about everyone began shouting as 13 and 𝗧𝗏 looked at us with a certain curious gleam in their eyes. Eventually the screaming died down and the detective kept asking questions about my childhood involving Bakugo and how 𝗓𝗏 ended up here. I gave the rundown of my unfortunate childhood involving Bakugo, including the fact that he did in fact put me on my deathbed where I died and where 𝗓𝗏 saved me. He then asked 𝗓𝗏 about her past, where she deflected most of the questions. All he got out of her was that she was in a fight and on the verge of death. She put everything led into teleporting to safety, and the next she knew she was lying next to me as I was dying. She said she had a theory that the amount of power she put into teleporting caused a small null to form and send her to this universe, hence the loud bang that sounded like a null imploding. The detective confirmed it was all the truth. Then came the question that silenced just about everyone with confusion. Have you ever been in contact with someone called AFO? The Merchant of Quirks, or any of his subordinates? We sat there and scanned the entire internet for any mention of someone by any of those names and found very little before we answered. You mean the boogeyman of the beginning of the Quirk era? Nope, never heard of him till now when I just did a deep scan of the internet, and even then there was very little on him. Nope, same as my sis here. We've never been in contact with him or his associates. He sighed in relief and asked us one more question to ease as he said, "Truth. Now, last question I believe. Do you mean any harm to the planet or any of its inhabitants?" We took a moment to think and giggled at the people who tensed up as I answered for both of us. As of this moment, the only ones that have anything to worry about are fake heroes or villains. And I speak for both of us. 𝐶𝐮𝐸𝐴 nodded as the detective said, "Truth," and everyone sighed in relief. With that all done, I stood up and went to leave. Thank God, this was taking forever, I thought. And suddenly stopped and turned to the detective before saying, "Oh, by the way. As it stands right now, not a single person on this planet could stop us if we wanted." With that, 𝐶𝐮𝐸𝐴 fizzled out of existence, and back next to me as I left I heard the petrified voice of the detective whisper, "Truth." Before the room was filled with an eerie silence. With that all over, and the room thoroughly terrified of us as we grinned and giggled with each other as we walked through the building towards the support department, talking about what we should do later after our visit to the support department since it was only 2 p.m. As we got closer to the department, we heard welding, things being thrown around and things being smashed. We looked at each other curiously as we approached the door. It exploded off its hinges and into the hallway, making us glitch a few feet away before catching a girl wearing a pair of cargo bottoms and a gray tank top and pink hair with steampunk-themed goggles on mid-coughing fit with my absolute solver, who was launched out with the door and a thick cloud of black smoke. I looked at 𝐶𝐮𝐸𝐴, who shrugged her shoulders and turned back to ask the girl, "You good? You just blasted out of that room." She looked dazed for a second before answering, "Huh? Oh yeah, I'm just trying to find a effective and compact power source for my latest baby." She pulled out a mangled length of black and pink metal with rings going down the center of 2 straight prongs with a trigger. One of 𝐶𝐮𝐸𝐴's eyes flashed with a hazard triangle that said, "Past hazard," under it as she spoke to me. "Doesn't that look like the railgun Uzi had?" I eyed the potential weapon with curiosity as I responded, "Yup. Although this one doesn't have a functioning power core. Should we help her out?" She weighed the options before saying back, "Sure, just make sure you implant some things that prevents it from being fired at us." I nodded as the girl rambled in front of us. She suddenly stopped when she noticed we were checking out her weapon and started to talk about it. "What do you think, huh? This is my magnetically amplified photon charger, or a particle railgun in layman's terms. It's my latest baby in the making and it super works. I just need a proper power supply for it." I looked at her for a moment and put her down as I started to speak. "So it uses super-powered magnets to fire photons at extreme speeds, shredding and atomizing everything in its path." She looked like she was going to cry in joy as she spoke back to me. "Why? You understand what I said?" I nodded as she jumped at me and hugged me, exclaiming, "No one ever understands. Especially another girl." I pried her off of me as 𝐶𝐮𝐸𝐴 shook her head and giggled as I led her back into the room. Yes, now would you like some help with a power source and the door?" She looked at me with a newfound curiosity. "How exactly are you gonna help me or lift that behemoth of a door?" I smirked as I used my absolute solver to lift the door. She lifted her goggles and stared in shock as I put the door back in its place. I watched her gobsmacked expression before I spoke. "Now about that power source for your 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘. Maybe you should change charger for launcher, that way you can name it 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐴/N, pronounced Maple. What do you think?" I watched as her golden crosshair eyes had stars in them as she dragged me into the room, which has a still smoking basic battery attached to each other in a relay on the table. I sighed and rubbed my temples as I spoke. "You tried to supercharge and fire photons with basic linked-up batteries." She rubbed the back of her head and looked away as she whistled. "I'm not allowed near the nuclear rods until my 3rd year, which is power loader's orders. He locked them in the lead-lined wall safe." I sighed and ripped the safe door off its hinges after she pointed it out. "Go get some safety gear on. I don't need any, so don't worry." She left to go put on some nuclear safety gear as I pointed my absolute solver at the cameras and made them blur me and 𝐶𝐮𝐸𝐴 as I pulled over the rest of the materials and assembled the casing for the internal components and fiddled with the gun, adding a line of code to make sure it can't fire at us when she came back in a lead-lined apron and the rest of the safety gear and pulled out the box of nuclear fuel rods. As I grabbed 3 of the most radioactive rods, making 𝐶𝐮𝐸𝐴's hologram fizzle and flicker as my skin visibly started to sizzle and turn red and boil away, revealing my metal drone body as BLD and oil started to trickle out of my skin, which she panicked at. "Are you insane? Get away from them now. I held her back with an extra limb as I used my absolute solver to assemble the rod holders and energy conversion unit before slowly and carefully slotting it within the containment chamber made of reinforced glass and lead before putting the lid on it and screwing it shut and welding it airtight. I let out a sigh of relief and tossed her the new power core, which she fumbled but caught it as I spoke. There you go. Should be good to fire 3 consecutive shots before needing a half-hour recharge. It's also got a near infinite amount of energy from the feedback loop it's in. The excess energy and heat gets put into the actual gun to fire it. She gently put the core down as she quickly checked me over, saying we needed recovery girl, and went to drag me out. I stopped her and said to watch. She waited for a second before my skin rippled and the _oil sunk back into my skin as the blistering skin healed as well. I don't need to worry about needing a doctor as I have near immortal levels of healing. Anyways, what do you think of the core? She looked back at the core before turning to me and asking, how? I've been trying all week to think of a proper source of energy and you came up with and built it in less than an hour. I've studied engineering since I could remember and couldn't figure out a solution. So how the hell did you know how to make one so quickly? She was clearly worked up, had a hint of jealousy in her tone as she sat down and looked at the glowing green cylinder. I looked at her and went to respond when 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐴 spoke up with a stabilized hologram. We're naturally good with machines and mechanics considering we are one. Both mine and the girl's heads snapped to my sister as if to say, what did you just say? When the girl we still didn't know the name of blurted out, wait, what? You're robots. 𝐒𝐮𝐴 sighed and looked at her. We prefer to be called drones, but sure, technically we are robots. She changed her hologram to that of her original worker drone form when the girl asked why we looked like regular people with quirks, as she explained, because we wanted to blend in so we wouldn't be taken apart like the way you want to now with that curious look in your eyes. The girl looked away embarrassed and filled with awkwardness before trying to shift the mood. So, I never got your names. Mine is 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘. Inventor extraordinaire at your service. We looked mildly surprised with our luck as I responded, well, you're just the person we were looking for here. Talk about luck. Anyways, our names is izuku Elliot and 𝐒𝐮𝐴 Elliot. Izuku and my sister is obviously 𝐒𝐮𝐴. May looked surprised we were looking for her and asked why. I told her I wanted my dress looking over to make sure it's fine after it took a massive explosion that tore my body apart. She looked at me like I was crazy and asked for it, so I took it off and sat there in my black underwear as I handed it to her blushing form before she exclaimed, put some clothes on. She stared at my body for a minute blushing before spinning in her seat to look away. I pouted as 𝐒𝐮𝐴 giggled at her, making me eventually giggle as well as I spoke. Aw, is the little inventor embarrassed by my body? I glitched behind her and hugged her from behind, making her freeze and exclaim, eek. Get off me while I check your hero dress is okay. I giggled before glitching back to my seat and leaving her be. Minutes later she turned back around, still blushing as she handed my dress back to me. I put it on as she explained, still looking around me. The dress was fine, just a little thin in certain areas. Now can we get back to my 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 gun? I nodded and helped her modify the gun to hold the power cell, the entire time teasing her. Eventually when we were done, 𝐒𝐮𝐴 gave me an idea to make 𝐒𝐿 even more embarrassed, making me giggle as I jumped at 𝗏 and gave her a quick peck on the cheek, making her cry out in embarrassment as she shoved me away from her. What the hell is izuku? Me and 𝐒𝐮𝐴 started laughing at her embarrassment and bright red face as I spoke. Consider it a thank you for making sure my dress is fine and for my sword and gun. She looked confused for a moment before responding quietly, it's fine, thank you for the power cell for the 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 gun. I smiled at her and got up to leave when she called after me and grabbed my hand, making me stop. Seriously izuku, thank you. If you want I will be your exclusive support partner as thanks. I looked at 𝐒𝐿 and she didn't know the term either. Catching our confusion, 𝗏 explained, it means that from now on all your hero and support gear will be handled by me directly. Not even the teachers can interfere with anything we ask of each other if we both consent to it, and when we leave UA we can continue the partnership if you want. In return I get publicity for my babies and any resources you or me can collect or get. Patents for we own as 50-50 owners. I considered it, and from my point and 𝐒𝐿 admitted it was a good deal, so I took it and signed a contract with her after printing out a fair contract that did as she stated and prevented us from leaking any trade secrets without severe repercussions, and it covered both our buttes in case anyone tried to copyright us. I then gave her a encrypted hard drive with blueprints of some stuff that doesn't exist in this world, such as a ion engine from the landing pods. And a oxygen generator that converts CO2 into oxygen like a plant. It's all stuff that can be seen as us trying to reverse the damage done to the Earth and advance humanity. I told her to keep these between us because the patents for them don't exist yet, and she agreed. After that, me and 𝗧𝗏 went back to the dorms to watch the sunset before going to bed and relaxing. The meeting room, just as 𝗏𝗏 and izuku RD person POV. As the duo were leaving, 𝗏𝗏 stopped and turned to the detective before basically saying that there's nothing on Earth that could stop them. This made everyone but the duo that now left and closed the door turn to the detective as he paled and whispered, "Truth." With that one word said, everyone sat there in shock at the revelation that the two people who just left the room couldn't be stopped if they desired it. A heavy atmosphere settled over the staff for a few minutes before Midnight spoke up. "How are we supposed to stop them now? Your plan involving 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗟𝗘 to neutralize their quirk is basically useless now as their abilities aren't a quirk 𝗧𝗍." Eventually the detective got a call and had to leave. 𝗧𝗍𝗧𝗟𝗘 was the next to speak, who voiced his agreement with Midnight's statement. "She's right, 𝗧𝗍. How can we possibly keep them under control if Aizawa can't disable their abilities? That was one of the conditions of the deal you made to get them into UA in the first place." Vlad King was the next to speak with a scowl on his face. "They're right, 𝗧𝗍. This is an unknown and uncontainable potential threat. We can't risk the safety of the public getting hurt just to try keep them happy." Throughout this, 𝗧𝗍 was quiet, deep in thought about all the information they've learned when 13 spoke up from within her safety suit, gaining his attention. "Look, we're missing the point here. Izuku and 𝗬𝗏 have just revealed that we let a repeated abuser and bully into the school. Frankly, Izuku has every right to be a villain. They have a dark past filled with abuse and bullying, and their abilities have a drawback that creates the need to kill and consume human bodies. I think we should be glad that despite everything, Izuku has 𝗬𝗏𝗏 to keep them somewhat grounded, and that despite their abilities they still want to be a hero, one that is willing to do the darker parts of a hero's job. Protecting the innocent from the darkness that lurks in the night." 𝗧𝗍 finally spoke up after the little speech from 13. 13 is right. The better question right now is how we control Izuku and 𝗬𝗏. But right now we need to ask what we're going to do with Bakugo. I did some looking into his past and from his previous schools. While his written reports from previous teachers say he was a model student with top grades, the CCTV footage from them is anything but that. 𝗧𝗏 typed away on his laptop, bringing up a series of footage clips from Aldra Junior School showing him repeatedly bullying students and threatening them, the most common being a short boy with green fluffy hair who never fought back and looked terrified, which the staff looked at with pity. The staff looked confused why the boy kept popping up until 𝗧𝗏 spoke up. "That green-haired boy you keep seeing Bakugo bully and threaten is Izuku." That statement made all the teachers' heads except 𝗏𝗏 snap to him as Recovery Girl spoke up first. "How is that innocent-looking child Izuku? That boy is clearly terrified and looks nothing like the Izuku we know now." Her question made everyone agree with her. 𝗧𝗏 spoke up again, making everyone quiet down. "It is very different from the Izuku we know. My only theory could be that Izuku was keeping everything a secret and hiding his true self until he got to UA to avoid government attention. As you all know, once a student enters UA, they become a partial ward of UA and are untouchable by the government and would need to commit unsanctioned crimes for the government to interfere. In Izuku and 𝗬𝗏's case, since their previous guardian inko Midoriya gave up their custody, they are a full ward of UA until they obtain their full hero license or come of age." The staff looked to be in thought until 𝗧𝗍 spoke up again. "Anyways, as you can see, Bakugo and the Elliott siblings have a deep-rooted and dark relationship. What should we do regarding Bakugo?" The staff sat there thinking what they should do when 𝗏𝗏 spoke up. "While it is obvious that young Bakugo has a dark past, he clearly has a drive to be a hero. I say we allow him to continue attending UA but put him on probation till further notice and put him in some clearly much-needed quirk therapy as well as regular therapy to curb his obvious anger and quirk control issues." Everyone thought it over and all agreed. 𝗧𝗏 spoke up. "All right, we will inform Bakugo of these conditions on Monday, and that if he violates his probation he will be sent to juvenile detention for years of underage and unauthorized quirk use, abuse, harassment, and assault." The teachers nodded in agreement with what 𝗧𝗍 said. Ectoplasm was the next to speak. "𝗧𝗍, we still haven't discussed what we shall do concerning the people this meeting was originally about. the Elliot siblings. How do you intend to stop them from getting out of control, sir? 𝗎𝐻𝗂 started to speak again. I was getting to that. Now concerning what we should do with MS and Mr./Ms. Elliot, I have decided that we ultimately can't do anything but guide them down the path of a hero. While we can't stop them from killing, we can at least aim and target the people they go after. We also could use them in the battle against a certain villain should they prove to be still around and kicking. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 stood up, banging his hands against the table in outrage. 𝗎𝐻𝗂, you know that isn't possible. Besides, what do you expect them to do against him of all people? We can't ask children to bear that responsibility. The other staff members looked confused about who they were talking about. 𝗎𝐻𝗂 looked at 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 and saw the rest of his staff confused. He sighed and rubbed his snout before speaking. The villain I'm talking about has been around since the dawn of 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘. Everyone but Recovery Girl, Aizawa, and 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 started shouting at 𝗎𝐻𝗂, saying it was impossible until 𝗎𝐻𝗂 continued speaking. The villain's 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 name has been lost to time, but he goes by All for One and has the ability to steal another's quirk and use them for himself. Who knows how many quirks he has at his disposal? It's more than likely he has some form of longevity quirk and a multitude of other healing quirks to stop his organs from failing. 5 years ago, All Might fought this villain, getting injured so badly it results in the current state you see All Might in, and apparently All Might landed a fatal blow to him. However, no body was ever recovered. Since then, I believe he is in hiding, biding time and recovering strength and allies. If my instincts are right and he is still scurrying around in the shadows, izuku and 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 would be detrimental to defeating him once and for all. With no quirk to steal and 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏's departing statement, which rang true with the detective's quirk, they could be a detrimental force against AFO. Think about it for a second at least. Izuku or 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 are quirkless, yet they have abilities that defy everything we know about quirked and quirkless people. They have the ability to regenerate from fatal damage with ease, the ability to teleport, the ability to control technology, the ability to create extra limbs with extended range, the base abilities to move, manipulate, deconstruct and limited reconstruction of matter, all of this without a quirk, and they have the ability to end a life without morality getting in the way. Now, if you were going to fight someone who has the ability to steal quirks, tell me that you wouldn't want izuku or 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏 on your side. The staff were shocked and terrified at the fact that such a villain existed without their knowledge before nodding in agreement after hearing 𝗎𝗂𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏's argument. Eventually, after everyone calmed down and came to terms with everything that was discussed, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 went to talk when he was interrupted by an alarm on his phone going off, making him exclaim, "Someone broke into the nuclear fuel rod safe." 𝗎𝗂𝗧 typed away furiously and pulled up the CCTV footage of the support classroom to see the possible intruder, and was surprised when he saw izuku, 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, and one of the other students there. 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 spoke up to get rid of any confusion regarding the other student. That's 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏, a first year who has a brilliant mind for inventing but is obsessed with sci-fi machinery and wants to change the world with her inventions. She's been trying to create a magnetically amplified photon charger for the past week, saying she wasn't able to without UA's resources. She's made leaps and bounds so far but still needs an effective and compact source of power. She devised that she needs nuclear energy, but she wasn't allowed to handle nuclear power until her 3rd year as it's highly unstable and dangerous. They kept watching as izuku told her to go get some safety gear, which 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 was thankful for, as he didn't want anyone handling fuel rods without proper safety equipment. They watched as izuku pulled May's newly dubbed gun to himself and fiddled with it before pointing his absolute solver at the camera and everything around, and the duo Oswell as izuku and 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 became fuzzy as if he was specifically blurred from the camera's view as he pulled multiple blurred objects to him from around the room, putting them together. May came back with full safety gear. She handed him the box of rods and pulled 3 bright rods out without any safety gear on, and gasped in horror as his blurred form's skin started to turn a blistering red as a blackish red substance started to leak from his skin and audibly sizzled even through the camera while holding back a worried May. Recovery Girl and 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 were outraged at izuku's reckless and careless behavior while admiring May's worry for someone they just met. They all watched with bated breath as he carefully placed the bright rods in the blurred object and sealed the container, which started to glow. They gasped when he carelessly tossed the container to a worried May and explained the new power source was basically an infinite supply of energy, as May tried to Recovery Girl's office after carefully putting the container down before stopping with shock as izuku's skin rippled and healed completely. After that they watched as Izuku explained the limits of the new power source and tell Mei the original reason they came by the support department. They then watched Mei 𝗏𝗡𝗏 get teased by Izuku and their body after she was caught checking out Izuku's body, which made Mei flustered and some of the teachers blush and look away out of morality and embarrassment. Eventually Izuku got the all clear for her hero outfit and put it back on, making the teachers sigh in relief. The next thing that happened took the teachers by surprise when Mei offered an exclusive partnership and even went to the extent to sign a contract with Izuku and 𝗔𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘. Once they signed the contract, Izuku and 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 left. 𝗔𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 turned off the cameras and sighed before he said, "Meeting over, you can return to what you were doing before all this." They all left and 𝗔𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 sighed again, clearly thinking deeply. Monday, after the first week of UA and the battle simulation Izuku's POV. It's now mine and 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏's second week at UA. Currently me and 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 are discussing the previous week and especially Friday last PRD, aka our first hero lesson, was a whirlwind of events. I gained an idea of everyone in my class's weaknesses and strengths in the hero lesson as well as a rough outline of their personalities over the week. Shoto Todoroki seems as cold as his quirk and seems to have a negative outlook on his fire aspects. My conclusion is that some form of past trauma must have happened for him to so blatantly ignore half of his quirk. That, or he's just plain stupid. Why reject half your total quirk when it could potentially risk lives? Not my issue, I thought to myself. Whatever his reason is doesn't pique my interest at this moment. I heard 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 speak up. Who cares what that kid's thought process is? It's stupid to reject part of his quirk when it covers the other part. Total insanity in my opinion. I giggled in response. Next was Momo Yaoyorozu, a wealthy background and effective quirk for rescue situations in a support role. Able to make materials and equipment on the fly as long as she has the fat to convert into different elements and compounds, and as long as she understands the molecular structure of an item, is truly a unique and interesting quirk. Could she convert fat into a form of stimulant to increase her energy or the ability to function longer? Needs more information. I thought and felt my sister agree with my last comment about our classmate. Her personality seems like a well-built mask with a poor foundation. She can come up with a rough plan with confidence, but once the plan doesn't go exactly how it was supposed to, she crumbles and can't function and overthinks in a panic till she builds herself back up. Conclusion: a rich, sheltered girl with a highly unique quirk who is so used to everything going her way and can't function and panics once a situation doesn't go her way. That's an accurate description and conclusion of someone we don't have a lot of personal knowledge of. Aizu, have a bow. She appeared on my waist and forced a bow. She pulled out of a draw into my hair as I struggled under her and swatted at her, trying to push her off me, exclaiming, "Get off me, see. You know I hate bows, so why do you keep putting them on me? First of all, no. Not until you admit bows are pretty. Secondly, you look cute in a pretty bow." She pouted at me as I struggled to get the bow out of my hair before giving up and ripping the diamond thing out and destroying it with a null. "We have homeroom soon and I'd like to keep going over our assessments of the others. And I do not look good in a bow." She refused to get up but mumbled, angry fine. I sighed and rested my head back in semi-defeat as I spoke aloud. Next would be 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. Her quirk would be useful for recon missions and some fighting situations, as she is able to use her earjacks to listen to conversations over long distances and can plug her earjacks into speakers and send out pulses of sound that can disorient people and, if close enough, potentially damage the hearing of a person. Her personality in classes and conversations I've overheard is complicated. She has a somewhat guarded personality, but if trusted she becomes quite open and friendly, hesitantly speaking about her interests in rock music and instruments. Most likely has some form of past with rejection in terms of her interests, causing her guarded and hesitant nature in relation to her musical tastes. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 nodded with my statements and observations, making me smile as she spoke. "What's your opinion of 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 BTW? I pondered for a moment before responding, "Tenya Ida, Aka 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. I didn't fight him, but from what I gathered about his personality, he is a clear rule follower, unable to see the grays in the world and only sees good and bad. Most likely gained from his hero family line. He went to a private school, so he must come from money or his family are successful heroes. Since he came from a line of heroes, he must have some form of past training with his quirk. Conclusion: a more serious person with a silver spoon in his mouth and a tree up his butt, which will get him killed in the real world if he doesn't realize the real world isn't as black and white as he currently believes. My sister nodded before speaking. I didn't really fight him either, I just restrained the idiot and won the simulation as I wasn't in the mood to deal with him. I hummed and asked what time it was, making her left eye flash. 8:27 am. I sighed and shoved the lens of the hologram projector into the pillow, making 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏's form disappear, making me smirk in amusement as her outraged voice echoed in our core. "But why'd you do that?" I ignored her and got up, getting ready for the school day ahead, sighing in anticipation at the headache that today is going to bring me, thinking, today is probably going to be an annoying amount of questions from the class. I finished getting changed into the male uniform and reshuffling my anatomy to fit said uniform as I mentally complained about the upcoming day. As I started walking to class by myself, as 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗟𝗘 said he needed to speak to Bakugo, I was contemplating what I should say when I get undoubtedly questioned about the battle simulation on Friday by the class. Me and 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 decided on a few choice word answers that could be interpreted in a few different ways to keep people confused and throw them off. Meanwhile, with Bakugo's POV, I got an email saying I was being called in an hour earlier today to talk about what happened in the simulation, probably to praise me for exposing that DMN Deku and the slot he calls a sister's monstrous nature. I smirked as I thought, it's about time they recognize the next #1 hero. How that DMN nerd got a better grade than me, the next #1 hero, is infuriating. That BS tier D thinking he's better than me. I thought as my quirk sparked at my anger with Deku as I ground my teeth in rage, thinking back to what he did. How the hell did he get the better grade when he slaughtered the old hag and old man before injuring the next top hero? I hit that bug with everything I had and he walked it off like nothing happened before that slot revealed what I did years ago. How the hell did he become so powerful? That power should be mine, not that nerd's. When I get my hands on that slot of a sister I'll make her give me that power. I was getting angrier every time I thought about it. I was secretly glad when I found out the hag and old man were fine when I got home. I was broken out of my train of thought when I got to the gate and saw that DMN hobo of a teacher was waiting for me. Once I was next to him, he grunted and nodded his head towards the school, indicating to follow him. I trailed next to him as we walked through the halls and finally said, "You know, if you wanted to reward me for what happened on Friday, you could have just announced it in our assembly to show everyone the next #1 hero." He ignored me as we walked for another 10 minutes, making my eye twitch with anger and my quirk to go off a little. That demon hobo is ignoring me. Eventually we came to a stop outside a door before he stopped and turned his head with a quirked glare, making my quirk stop in its tracks before speaking evenly but sternly to me. "You're not here to be praised if you think that. A few things were revealed over the weekend and we just need to confirm the facts presented to us. Now be quiet and keep your quirk under control or I will do it for you." I thought over what he said. What does he mean? I proved that DMN Deku and that slot are monsters. Before I could ask what he means, he walked into the room and a high-pitched voice greeted him before the higher voice said I could come in. I walked in, seeing the hobo teacher standing next to some sort of animal in a business suit without the blazer sat behind a stupidly high desk and the source of the high-pitched voice. The animal started talking to me. "Hello Katsuki Bakugo, thank you for coming in early today. I trust your dislocated shoulder from Friday is alright now thanks to recovery girl. Anyway, I'm sure you're wondering who I am and I'd like to inform you that I'm Nizu, I run UA. It seems a few things concerning your past with izuku and 𝗔𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘 have been brought to light and we just wanted your side of the story. And I should warn you now that we have reviewed the CCTV footage from your old schools. So do not lie to me if you want to continue your education here at my school." My eyes shot wide open in panic. What did they see? "This is the principal of UA." He chuckled a little and spoke again. "Judging by your face, you've just realized that you're probably not going to get praised like you did at your old school. I just wanted to know why a student with a perfect record with top scores in all their mock tests, who is well-mannered and kind according to their past reports from previous teachers, is actually quite the opposite. From what your current teachers have told me, you're brash, overly aggressive, egotistical, and has a rather disturbing amount of physical and psychological tormenting people in the past." He took a moment to pause before spinning his monitor around to face me as it played clips of me teaching Deku his place beneath me like the bug he is. He started to speak again in that cheerful DMN tone that's starting to piss me off. Just look at what the CCTV at your previous schools caught. Granted, up until you were 5 years old, underage quirk usage laws were protecting under the guise of kids still learning to control their quirks. But the moment after your 5th birthday, you continued to harass, belittle, and downright torture others who were seen as weaker by you. Mainly one 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗘 up until your admittance to my school. And that is something that can't be overlooked. So I will ask this one question. Why did you do it? I was angry. No, I was furious. That DMN Deku is ruining my future career, and now they have proof of it. My hands were twitching as my heartbeat was pounding away like a hammer in my ears. My quirk was about to go off until I felt the familiar quirk disabling glare from the hobo shutting down my quirk's activation. It was the hobo's turn to speak up now. Answer the question, Bakugo. Frankly, you shouldn't even be in this school, but we can't risk expelling you and you becoming a villain. He was cut off by the rat clearing his throat, but the message the hobo was gonna say was clear. They didn't want to risk me becoming a villain. I ground my teeth as I answered, why? You wanna know why? It is because that shitty Deku deserved it. He always thought he was better than me. Always doing better in the tests even when the teachers tried to dock his grades. He's a useless bee and a freak on top of it who should have died all those years ago. He and that slot deserve it. Why should he have that power when it should be mine? I am the next #1 hero and they're nothing. My rant was promptly cut off by the hobo's scarf thing wrapping around my mouth as he glared at me with his quirk while I struggled trying to pry the thing from off my mouth. The rat was rubbing his snout before he sighed and spoke in a tone that was just as high-pitched but held none of the previous cheerfulness. So you borderline tortured and actually attempted the murder of 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗘 and then his sister 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗃 later on out of what? A petty jealousy formed from a delusion that you created thinking he was looking down on you. He was a child who has become a cold and sadistic person due to the torment you put them through, and you were and still are a delusional, egotistical child who still can't control their emotions. I reckon if it wasn't for their healing factor they'd be littered in scars. Especially the ones where you and your previous classmates carved words into his arms with a knife and using your quirks on the poor kid. His voice was cold by the end of it as I struggled to free myself from the DMN scarf to no avail, thinking back to that day as it played on the monitor. CCTV footage Bakugo's POV. It was a regular day minus the surprise exam our teacher gave us. It was last PRD on a Friday and the teacher just pinned up the surprise exam results. Deku got first with 98% per 100%, I was second with 94% per 100%, and then the extras were after me. I was seething in thought, how dare that BSU get first place? Does he think he's better than me? The bell rang, making the teacher get up and leave as Deku was quick in packing up, trying to leave without us noticing. Too bad, because I grabbed him by the shoulder and yanked him back into his desk, making the BSRD fall. A few of the other extras must have gathered behind me because the nerd was trembling as his eyes flicked around at the extras, I'm guessing. I grabbed him by his collar and slammed him into the wall as he trembled. I exclaimed, getting better scores than US Deku. You think you're better than US, huh? I'll show you. I used one hand to pin him to the wall as I placed my other hand on his shoulder and blew apart his uniform and burned his shoulder, leaving a bright pink and red spiky handprint there. I heard the extras that stayed to watch agree with me and begin tossing around ideas to teach the DMN nerd a lesson he won't forget, making the BSRD in my grip tremble and mutter stupid apologies as if that'd make us stop. One of them gave me an idea when I heard, let's make him remember what he is forever. I grinned as I demanded someone to give me something sharp and was soon handed a small straight silvery black blade made with the extra's quirk. I watched as the nerd's eyes shot wide open and tears started to fall from them as he shook his head and begged me not to do it. I ordered the extras to hold him, making him squirm and thrash around trying to get free. I took the blade and ripped his sleeve off, exposing his forearm as I pressed it against the wall and smiled, digging the blade into his skin, watching the red BLD leak with a small tint of black, making me think in confusion, must be the extra's quirked blade or something. I ignored the screams that Deku were making and just told him to shut it and for the extras to hold him still as I kept carving the words, useless Deku, into his forearm, watching the BLD trail down his shaking pale arm and drip onto the floor beneath us. Once it was done, I just stabbed the blade straight through his hand to pin it to the wall, ignoring the grinding noise coming from the blade and his hand, watching the wound bubble and drip red and black blood as the extras let go, and we laughed at his crying, shaking form before telling him, "That's what you get, you piece of tea. Next time don't think you're better than me." We laughed a little more before we all went and grabbed our stuff, ignoring Deku's pleas and cries for help as we left. RD person POV. The classroom was empty except for the small pale boy with a blade holding his hand to the wall with the words, "Useless Deku," carved into his arm as he cried and pleaded for help, and kids laughing at him. Eventually the other kids left, ignoring the pale boy. Once the last kid, a ash-blonde red-eyed boy, left, the pale boy stopped crying instantly and sighed before standing up and ripping his hand off the wall without an ounce of pain showing on his face. He looked at his arm before sighing and making a green symbol appear on his other hand and over the blade before the blade was yanked out, making another metal-on-metal grinding sound before a new symbol appeared and the blade was crushed into a small marble-sized ball and eaten by the boy. The now open wound was bleeding more blood with more black than red as he spoke, "Damn it, he went straight through my hand and hit a oil pipe. Mind helping me out here?" Just as he finished speaking, a tail, some form of eel head, grew out from between his trousers and shirt before it spoke with a sad tone. "Sure thing, Izu. I'm sorry you have to go through this." The boy shook his head and said it was fine and that he was used to it, as all the blood from him in the room started to sizzle and evaporate as his wounds did the same before being covered in a reddish-silver liquid and sealing before turning back into skin. The only remnants of anything happening being his torn and burnt uniform and the blade-shaped hole in the wall from where his palm was nailed to the wall. He sighed before grabbing his stuff and leaving the room. Back in Nizu's office, Bakugo's POV. I was shocked as I thought, that's why he didn't scar. That's why there was black mixed with his blood, not because of that extra's quirked blade. And that's what that metallic grinding was. I hit his metal hand under his skin. He didn't even care that a blade was put right through his hand. It was all a act. Was he looking down on me or something? I was growling into the diamond hobo's scarf as he glared at me intensely, and the rat spoke up, "As you can see, we wouldn't believe it if we didn't have this footage. And I assure you, this isn't the only clip we have now. So you have one of two options, Katsuki Bakugo. The first one is rather simple. We hand over all the footage we have collected to the proper authorities and you will be placed in front of a judge for your numerous crimes." He took a breath before speaking again as he stared down at my pale, wide-eyed face. "Or, against my better judgment, I can place you on probation for the foreseeable future while you attend mandatory psychological and quirk therapy to curb your blatant disregard for quirk usage and clear anger management issues. If you fail your probation or aren't seen to be making any progress in therapy, every charge that can be brought upon you will be. Choose wisely, as this is your only chance." The scarf was removed from my mouth as I sat there pale and grinding my teeth in frustration as that dimmin nerd. He and that slot are dead. My future as the #1 hero could be destroyed because of those bastards. I growled out my response to the rat, waiting for my response. "I'll take the second choice, obviously." He smiled dangerously at me before speaking. "Good choice. I'll get the paperwork sorted and inform your parents that you'll be staying behind for an extra hour every Wednesday for quirk therapy and Friday for psychological therapy. I do have to inform them why if they press for details, as they are your full guardians and need to know." I went as pale as snow, thinking, if the hag and old man find out what I've done, I am dead. I nodded stiffly and he dismissed me, telling me to get to class as school is starting soon. I got up and left hastily, seething in anger at Deku and that slot. When I get my hands on them, I'll kill them and take that power they have for myself. I thought to myself as I walked through this maze of a school towards homeroom. Izuku's POV. I was sat in homeroom with 15 minutes before class starts. I was at my twin desk with 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐦𝐸 as we were talking to each other through our core about possible scenarios for hunts and how to complete them with minimal effort or power usage. Right now our assimilation meter is sitting at a solid and comfortable 879% per 1000%, so we don't really need to go out on a hunt unless we go overboard and start spamming null-s or creating and cutting off a stupid amount of extra limbs. We kept talking for a few minutes and people started to trail into the class and take their seats, not noticing us due to our stealth skills. The only one noteworthy was Bakugo, who looked pale, like his world had come crashing down around him. I was curious about what could bring him off his high horse because me and 𝗬𝗏 desperately wanted to thank that thing profusely. We smiled and giggled at his face, making the class turn their attention to us and jump in shock that we were here. All of a sudden there were mixed reactions from the class. Some looked like they were about to PSS themselves like 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘. The majority looked uncomfortable like they wanted to pity us but didn't say anything like Kirishima, and a few looked at us in some form of admiration. The most noticeable being Tokoyami, who looked like he wanted to worship us, and Ishido, who jumped up and bounced over to us before sitting on our desk and saying in that bubbly tone of hers, "Hey my 𝗔𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘, you all right now?" That was one hell of battle on Friday. I looked at her as one of my eyes turned into a question mark and spoke up confused, "Thief." She nodded her head before speaking. "It stands for gender fluid friend." I nodded and she asked if I was all right again, to which I responded that I was fine and just needed some food to recover my strength. She nodded and was about to start talking again, but 𝗧𝗪 walked in and the bell went off as he told everyone to sit down in their seats, forcing Ishido to give a quick talk later as she went back to her seat. Once we all sat down, he did the register and announced, "It's time for your first battle as a class." That sentence made the majority of the class tense up and start whispering to each before he spoke again, "You need to choose a class president. I don't care how you do it, just figure it out and don't wake me up." With that said, he climbed into his yellow cocoon sleeping bag and flopped onto his side. The classroom was quiet for a minute before being filled with yelling over who should be the class president, while I just smiled at the chaos being made and giggled with my sister as I said to her, "Oh, how I love to watch chaos take over," to which she nodded as she agreed with me. After a few minutes, knockoff Sonic suggested that we all do it diplomatically by voting, and the chaos died, making me and 𝗬𝗏 frown at the blue-haired Sonic wannabe BSE. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 made a box and some paper for everyone to write who they think should be the class president and vice president. When me and 𝗬𝗏 both got our slips of paper, we smiled at each other and used our absolute solvers to crinkle them into a compressed ball before launching them at the back of Bakugo's and knockoff Sonic's heads at stupid speeds and the force compared to a RBB bullet as we tried to hide our giggles. The look of barely suppressed rage from Bakugo and outraged expression from 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 as they looked around after the cries of pain from each of them that drew everyone but 𝗧𝗪's attention and subsequent confusion at them. Once everyone voted and put their slips of paper in the box minus mine and 𝗬𝗏's, the votes were counted and somehow I got the position of class president after I got 5 votes, making me look around at the class in confusion. 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 became vice president with 4 votes and 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗧𝗏 coming just behind him with 3 votes. No one voted for Bakugo except himself, I'm guessing, as he had a single vote, agreeing with my sister when she said to me through our core, "Dumbass probably voted for himself." The class demanded a speech, so I sighed and glitched to the front of the class before stating, "Thanks, but I don't want the position." Therefore, as my first and last act of president of 1A, I hereby hand over the title of president to Momo 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗧𝗏, because screw you, knockoff Sonic. I pointed at 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗧𝗏, who looked surprised and became embarrassed, while my backhanded insult to the Sega reject made him scowl and mutter something unintelligible under his breath. I let 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗧𝗏 go through her speech, not paying attention, until she turned to me and bowed, saying, "Thank you, izuku." I nodded dismissively as I turned to 𝗧𝗪, who was still passed out in that eyesore of a cocoon, before yanking it off the ground and dropping it back on the floor. He groaned in pain as he sat up and glared at me as I giggled with 𝗬𝗏 at his pain before he said in a set of voice, "What the hell was that for you, demon problem child?" The class looked torn between wanting to laugh and trying not to anger him any more than I already had as I calmly spoke, unaffected by his glare. The class elected me as president, but I didn't want it, so I made 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗧𝗏 president while 𝗧𝗓𝗧 became vice president. He sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose before nodding. He got up and finished the announcements. The only one that caught my attention was when he said, "By the way, we will be taking a trip to the USJ on Thursday, so get your parents to sign these permission slips stating they acknowledge that you will be leaving UA for a day and UA isn't liable for any injuries while off campus." He pulled out a stack of forms and handing said forms out before turning to me and my dear sister and saying, "Don't worry, problem children, due to your current family arrangements you do not need to get the slip signed." The class was quiet, looking at me confused and curious as to what 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗏 meant while I nodded. The curious silence was broken when Kaminari exclaimed, "We get to go to the Universal Studios of Japan." Me and 𝗬𝗏 sighed in unison with 𝗧𝗪𝗧 as he quickly rectified Kaminari's stupidity by saying, "We won't be going to a theme park. We will be going to the unforeseen simulation joint where you will be going through a day of rescue training. Kaminari made a silent, oh, face and quickly sunk into his seat in embarrassment where he stayed quiet. Eventually Shota's announcements came to an end as he told us to get ready for our next lesson with the bell went off shortly afterwards. The day was going as slow as a victimless hunt on a rainy night. My sister shortly gave up sticking around after the lesson about how to structure our phrasing for the public and press without coming off as bigoted or offensive while being woke, as he called it. Truthfully, I wish I could have just retreated to our core and let 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐸𝐴 deal with the teachers, classmates and the lessons that drag like a dead body, but what can you do, I suppose? Me and my sister decided to check up on our support shop legal partner during lunch and see if she made any progress with the blueprints we gave her. As the day went on, I found the clouds outside more interesting and started to ignore ectoplasm's so-called advanced math. Me and 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐸𝐴 have a shared mechanical neural network that's faster than any computer on this planet, so anything that doesn't require our core to start quantum computing is like asking Nizu what's 1 + 1. Luckily art is the last lesson before lunch, so I can finally go see 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘. Unfortunately, it's also scheduled with a teacher who clearly has the largest form of dislike for me, which I can't be bothered to figure out why. My current theory is she just doesn't like us due to our abilities and their drawback. She stood at the front of the class and started talking. All right, class. This is your 5th class with me, and today I want you to create a picture from your memories. The reason I'm asking you to do this is because the line of heroics is filled with a lot of negativity that the public doesn't see. Having a creative outlet can help process more complex feelings you will have in the future and can remind you of the reason you want to be a hero. With that said, you know where the supplies are and you can get started. I just grabbed some charcoal, paper and some yellow and green colors. I thought about drawing the aftermath of the Earth after 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐴 assimilated it, but decided that I would draw something else from 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐴's memory banks, and that being the place I spent the beginning of my flashbacks when 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐴 accepted me into her core alongside her, the old Elliott mansion. After 48 minutes of drawing and perfecting the lighting and shadows, I was finished. Midnight walked by and tried to give me detention for making up a building that couldn't have been from my memories, as the building looked like it was built before the dawn of quirks and that there wasn't that type of scenery in Japan. As she was about to give me a detention, I cut her off saying, "It's a shared memory between me and my sister. If you don't believe me, I can create a replayed simulation like 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐴 did when she replayed the memory of my first encounter with her, but of the drawing instead. Any and all wide-scale simulations such as simulating the drawing have to be replayed memories due to the complexity of all the different types of variables in an environment such as a beach's sea breeze blowing sand and the waves crashing against the beach, or the wind blowing the leaves of a tree." Midnight smirked and called my bluff. "Okay, recreate the picture you drew right now and I'll let you go 5 minutes early. If you can't, then you have a 2-hour detention after school." I smiled as I created a few hologram projectors with my absolute solver symbol that changed after a quick spin and displayed a green command window showing /welcome absolute solver OS administrator izuku /𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐴𝐴 memory recreation and projection true /false /true executing memory recreation and projection. After the command windows displayed their text, the projectors flickered with a green light before the classroom around us was replaced. With the woods in front of the old Elliott Manor before 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐴 joined us all and looked to me before whisper yelling worriedly to me, "Izu, why are you playing this memory? This is the day Tessa found and repaired me. I don't want to see this." I reassured her it was fine before telling the class, "Don't go looking around, there are sights here that you'll never be ready to see." My statement made some of the class look at me with curiosity as I just stared at the moon hugging my sister to comfort her. I was ignoring all the questions being shot around when I heard 2 screams and a familiar voice shout, "What the actual F is this, you dumb nerd?" I spun around to the Bakugo, Midnight and 𝐒𝐴𝐴 peeking around the corner of the manor as the other students went over there, curious as to what made them scream. Due to the amount of people there, the simulation automatically moved to the point of view of the majority of people, which made the simulation spin, throwing some people off balance from the sudden shift in environment. What they saw was the pile of discarded and damaged worker drones with oil dripping from cracked visors and missing limbs, as a female black silhouette with white eyes was seen dragging a screaming and struggling worker drone with a cracked visor leaking oil and glitching yellow optics from the pile of drone corpses towards the manor. I was furious. I told them not to look around, so as punishment I broke the three nosy idiots' arms by twisting them with my absolute solver until I heard multiple snaps from each arm, earning screams of pain from them. Not caring about any punishment I may get, I glared at them, creating multiple claws, tentacles and scythe-like limbs. The sight made a few of the students throw up at the sight. 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗘 was shaking with fear and anger at watching the memory before she suddenly screamed in a panicked and clearly emotionally unstable tone, "Enough. Administrator access. System override. End simulation." The simulated world around us froze before it glitched and stopped existing as we were back in the classroom. I grabbed in and hugged my sister, pressing her face into my chest, rubbing her back as I turned my head like an owl towards the class and beach of a teacher glaring hard enough to shut them up before any of them spoke. I screamed at them, "How dare you snoop around our memory when I willingly showed it and said not to look around. If you even whisper about this, I'll make sure you never see daylight again." The multiple claws and scythe-like limbs I created kept them quiet as I turned my attention back to my clearly shaken and unstable sister. I glitched away, not waiting for a response from those nosy pricks making 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗏 to glitch with me. We were in our room on our bed as I kept rubbing her back and apologizing for what just happened. I never wanted 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗏 to watch how she was dragged from the corpse pile by Tessa, considering how she can't remember her initial reactivation. 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗏 started to feel awful over what she did to Tessa's body years ago after my personality rubbed off on her. She had to listen to the screams of Tessa begging for her to stop and for her mother to help her still haunt 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗏. Developing empathy was a double-edged sword when I took my sister's past into consideration. I told 𝗬𝗏 to spend the rest of the day thinking and sorting out her emotions in our core. She was hesitant, but I told her I wouldn't be going back to class so she can talk to me whenever she wants. Not that I wouldn't answer her straight away regardless of the situation I'm in, but being in a class with two BSTRDS who think poking around in another person's past is fine would be distracting, like putting a starving tiger in a cage with a bunch of tied-up rabbits while trying to keep the tiger from going berserk. She finally agreed and I said, "Remember, I'm always here for you, sis." As she fizzled out of sight and the projection ended, she gave me a small smile. Off in the distance I heard the lunch bell go off and thought about finding 𝗧𝗱𝗏 and 𝗎𝐻𝗂 to get ahead of the three broken arms of idiots. I sighed and got up, shifting my body's gender back to female as I think to myself, I think I'm more comfortable in a feminine body, maybe a side effect from being merged with 𝗬𝗏𝗏. I'll ask her later. I got up and stretched, hearing a satisfying series of clicks from my spine. I went to get changed into something more comfortable considering my female body shape. Once I got changed, I glitched to the entrance of the staff room and knocked. After a few seconds I heard the high-pitched cheerful voice of 𝗎𝗎𝗓 yell through the door, "Come in." I entered, seeing the majority of the staff sat at their own desks eating their lunch. I wasn't really surprised when I didn't see Midnight or Recovery Girl there. My attention was brought back to 𝗎𝗎𝗓 when he said, "Ah, Mrs. Elliot, how can I help you today?" His tone of voice suggested that he knew something happened, making me narrow my eyes at him as I answered him, "There was an incident in my last class. Due to this I injured a few people and won't be attending the last class today. I figured I might as well get ahead of the situation and came here." He smiled through my entire explanation as the rest of the teachers looked over in confusion after 𝗧𝗱𝗏𝗧𝗏 said in a confused and curious tone, "How could something require you injuring people in art class, problem child?" I shrugged and went to talk when Recovery Girl walked in with a scowl on her face as she made her way over to 𝗎𝗎𝗓𝗧 before she noticed me and scowled, pointing her syringe-shaped cane at me as she addressed the principal. "𝗎𝗎𝗓, I just had Nemuri, Tenya Ida and Katsuki Bakugo in my office, all with multiple breaks in their right arms beyond complete repair with my quirk due to izuku here. I demand an explanation and a punishment." The teachers looked shocked at her outburst before focusing on me as I was absent-mindedly picking at my nails on my flesh hands. Eventually 𝗎𝗎𝗓 sighed and said my name to get my attention before he spoke, "Mrs. Elliot, why did you break their arms?" I shrugged and responded, "We were viewing a memory that my sister doesn't completely remember and tries not to think about, as it has distressing emotional significance for both of us, but more so her. I warned the class, including Midnight, not to go looking around, but she, along with Ida and Bakugo, ignored my warning and saw something in the memory which drew the other students over. Angered at ignoring my warning and causing the memory to shift to their point of view, making my sister unstable, I broke their arms and threatened them. At the end of the day, I don't regret it. They brought it on themselves thinking it's fine to go snooping around another person's memories after being warned not to go poking their noses where they don't belong. Recovery girl got angry and went on a rant pointing her cane at me saying, "That doesn't give you a reason to break their arms. I demand to see what caused you to break their arms now." I narrowed my eyes at her and responded by snatching the cane from her grip with my absolute solver before mutating it into a warped mass of bloody flesh and metal as the lights flickered, and I spoke in a cold tone, "You have no right to demand anything of me. They disobeyed me when I gave them a warning and they got punished for it. What they saw is deeply personal to me and my sister, therefore you won't ever set eyes upon it." The room was visibly sick from the writhing and dripping BLD mass that used to be a cane. 𝗔𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 spoke up, trying to move the subject away from my shared past with 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲 by saying, "Enough, Chio. While 𝗧𝗑 did assault 3 people and will be punished for it, we can't force them to share something they don't want to. Now, you said before that your quirk couldn't completely fix their arms. Why is that?" Recovery girl kept scowling as she used a table to keep her upright as she explained their injuries. All 3 of them have identical injuries. Their arms were dislocated and then broken multiple times. Due to the nature of my quirk focusing the person's energy into healing an injury, they don't have enough energy to fully heal the multiple breaks. I've managed to fix 3 out of 5 breaks with my quirk after manually relocated their arms. They'll be in casts till tomorrow or Wednesday at the latest before I can fully heal them with my quirk. 𝗔𝗓𝗧𝗏 nodded and took the information in before turning to me. "Izuku, while they disobeyed your warning, you still need to be punished for assaulting 2 classmates and a member of staff. Therefore you'll have detention with me every day after school for an hour and won't be allowed on your nightly excursions till next week." I nodded in response. Me and 𝗓𝗏𝗏 have hunted enough to last us a couple of weeks without anything strenuous happening, and 5 hours of detention is nothing. Recovery girl looked annoyed with the light punish I got but kept quiet. All of a sudden alarms started blaring through the building, making the staff stand up as 𝗔𝗓𝗧𝗏𝗏 checked the cameras and sighed before speaking to the room. "It's the press. They got in somehow. Aizawa, Mike and Vlad King, I want you to get the press of sight. Hound Dog, Power Loader and Mrs. Elliot come with me to find out how they got in. The rest of you, I want you to go around the school and calm the students down as they are currently panicking." I left with 𝗔𝗓𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏, Hound Dog and Power Loader. We got outside to see 𝗧𝗱𝗏, present Mike and Vlad King trying to herd and direct the press out of the front gate, stopping any reporters that got past them with 𝗧𝗱𝗏's scarf or Vlad King's quirk. We patrolled along the wall and found a sloppily made hole in the wall that was covered in gray and brown rust. 𝗔𝗓𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏 rubbed some between his paws before putting some in a test tube he pulled from his pocket as he spoke. "Power Loader, can you take this and figure out what caused this? Hound Dog, can you smell anything or anyone that might have caused this?" Power Loader nodded and walked off as Hound Dog growled and started sniffing around for a few minutes before shaking his head signaling he couldn't find anything. 𝗔𝗓𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏 turned to me and asked me to try find anything. I scanned the area before liking my eye to fix my glitching eye caused by scanning. Some bugs in the absolute solver can't be fixed, such as my eye glitching after a scan. I tasted some of the rust and some of the unaffected wall before turning to 𝗔𝗓𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏 and telling him, "My scan tells there's no chemical signatures around the wall, rust, or in the air. The hole is sloppy, so we can rule out any form of matter manipulation quirk. The rust is just an oxidized version of the metal in the wall, and the dust is just erosion of the concrete. The issue is that this amount of rust and erosion would take decades. Therefore it must be some form of rapid aging quirk that speeds up the process of nature in a limited area. I doubt anyone in the press would risk their careers for a single scoop, but the press contains idiots, so I'd check their records anyway just to be safe." 𝗔𝗓𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏 nodded and asked me to try repair it. I narrowed my eyes and explained my powers don't work like that. He told me to try anyway, and that if I did I don't have to do tonight's detention. I sighed before using my absolute solver to collect and condense the dust and rust into a beach ball of gray and brown before moving it into the hole and flattening the ball out and twisting it to fit in and dig into the wall. 𝗔𝗓𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏 smiled at me and went to say something before he was stopped by my absolute solver glitching and making the repaired spot in the wall mutated and became a wall that pulsed and twitched while it developed some fleshy metal tentacles that clung to the wall and floor around it. I looked at 𝗔𝗓𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏 with a pointed stare as the wall kept twitching and oozing oil and BLD. He spoke up, "It's only a temporary fix till Power Loader can fix the wall properly. Besides, this proves you can use your power to repair instead of just consuming and destroying. I shook my head and explained that my absolute solver's primary purpose is assimilation and destruction. I walked off explaining I'm going back to the dorm. Once I got back to the dorm, I laid in my bed before dozing off and setting an alarm for 15 minutes before the sun sets. With Class 1A third-person POV, the class was sat at a table in the lunch hall minus 2 students, those students being the resident teacher's pet and resident terrorist. They were discussing their last lesson and what they saw in a certain green-haired student's and their sister's memory. They were collectively thinking and talking over what they saw towards the end of memory, where there was a pile of robot limbs and bodies that were leaking oil. They were wondering who that black silhouetted person dragging the screaming mystery robot was when the alarm started blaring. One of the class members asked their seniors what's going on. The senior explained that the alarm was because someone broke into UA. This made the class worry and panic as they joined the forming stampede. As they struggled through the hall, some of the staff came along and explained it was just the press. That calmed the students down as the teachers made them go back to their homerooms until the all clear was given. Izuku's POV. It was finally Friday, which meant we were going to the USJ today. I think I remember 13 saying she ran the USJ when she wasn't doing her classes or hero work, which meant we would probably be seeing her today. My dear sister has gotten back to her usual giggly psychotic self. I spoke to her about going through all the memories she tries to forget so she can begin working through the negative emotions connected to them. No need to say she was extremely against that idea until I told her that she can't keep avoiding them forever. Flashback Izuku's POV. It's now Tuesday night. I was relaxing above the clouds after watching the sunset, and I needed to have a conversation with my sister that she's not going to like. Sensing my unease, 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐦𝐸𝐴, Aizu, what's up? You seem uneasy. I sighed as I responded out loud. We need to talk, and I think it would be better if we did this face to face. This made her panic, thinking she did something wrong as she made a projector and appeared almost instantly looking panicked as she spoke in a worried tone. What happened, Aizu? Did I do something wrong? I quickly calmed her down and said she didn't do anything wrong, but that we needed to talk about yesterday. She went silent and tried to disable the projection, making me point my solver at her as lines of code appeared around her // admin and permissions disabled true / false / admin and permissions disabled true / I disabled her ability to end the projection as she looked at me worried. I sighed and hugged her, pulling her close to me, saying, "Sorry sis, but we need to talk about this. You need to work through these memories. It's not healthy to ignore and repress them." I felt her shake her head against my chest as she kept trying to re-enable her admin permissions. Eventually I pulled her away from me and said to her that she needs to get past this, to which she said, "I don't want to relive what I've done though." I told her we don't have to do it all today, but we should at least get the worst one out of the way. She turned pale as her eyes widened and she went silent, trembling in my arms, making me pull her into another hug as I whispered into her ear, "It's going to be all right. I'll be here with you the entire time." She finally nodded, albeit weakly, as I smiled proudly at her and comforted her for her courage as she said, "Let's just get this over with, /n. The next part contains gore and torture, so skip if you don't want to read it. And be warned that it gets quite messed up and graphic. This is entirely from my own imagination, so yes, I'm aware I need psychological help." I sighed and held her left hands as I created multiple projectors that ran lines of code around them which said / admin access Izuku / memory file tm01274 replay true / false / memory file tm01274 replay true / the clouds and sky around us were replaced by the basement under the old Elliot Manor that my sister was often locked up in, the only difference being that instead of 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐸𝐴 being locked up down there, it was Tessa. She was frozen in a screaming position as she was suspended a few feet off the air. And was shaking in my arms at the sight, knowing what comes next as I started the memory, which resulted in the frozen, chained up Tessa breathing and crying, begging 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐸𝐴 to stop, saying, "Please, please, just let me go. I didn't do anything." I heard a giggle as a giant mechanical centipede's body was encompassing the room, with the top half of 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐸𝐴's drone body fell in front of the suspended Tessa before saying, "Giggle, the flesh demands invitation for host 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐴. Tessa, A flesh and metal hand grabbed Tessa's chin and stroked her head as she cried out begging for 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐴 to stop and let her go. The whole time my sister shook and had tears in her eyes at the 𝐒𝐮 quietly begging me to stop the memory, making me apologize and comfort her. 𝗵𝐸𝐶𝐮 could be seen ignoring Tessa's begging as she struggled to pick up some surgical tools with a claw as she sighed in annoyance and say, "Annoyed, please be quiet for the operation," before she slashed Tessa's throat with a scythe-like claw, slicing part of her vocal cords but not deep enough to cut through her windpipe, making Tessa's pleads for help get cut off and replaced by weak ms and whimpers of pain. 𝗵𝐸𝐶𝐮 finally got a grasp of a scalpel and moved towards a shaking Tessa before going behind her and holding her in place and slicing down Tessa's spine, making her scream out in pain as she tried to thrash and pull away from the scalpel. This made 𝗵𝐸𝐶𝐮 giggle sadistically as she used a claw to pull her skin from her muscle, making Tessa scream and cry as the sickening noise of flesh being torn and peeled slowly from muscle was drowned out with the screams of sheer pain from Tessa. I was torn from the sight by my sister now openly sobbing and apologizing to the memory of Tessa, making me tear up as I wrapped my arms around her and hugged her, telling her, "It's all right, see, this is all in the past. I don't hold any of it against you, sister." She kept crying and apologizing as the memory kept playing. The screams of Tessa didn't deter 𝗵𝐸𝐶𝐮 from pulling and peeling the skin from Tessa's body. Eventually 𝗵𝐸𝐶𝐮 skinned her entire back. She moved to her arms, ignoring the cries of pain from Tessa. The process repeated for another 20 minutes, filling the simulated room with screams, giggles, BLD, muscle and organs splattering against the floor. How Tessa managed to stay alive so far was a horrifying mystery that made me hug my sister closer. Eventually the back of Tessa's skin was hanging limply, still connected to the front of her body, as 𝗵𝐸𝐶𝐮 pulled out 2 mirrors with one in front and another behind Tessa as she grabbed Tessa's head and forced her to look in the mirror in front of her, saying, "Giggle, what do you think, Tessa?" The sight of her body's dripping with BLD insides exposed to the air made her scream until her throat went hoarse. The entire time 𝗵𝐸𝐶𝐮 giggled and laughed at Tessa before saying, "Happy time for the front, Tessa." 𝗵𝐸𝐶𝐮 started to cut into Tessa's front half of her body, cutting around where the shoulder meets her arm and where her hips met her legs before starting to peel the front half of Tessa's skin off her body, making her organs like her intestines, liver and stomach spill out of her body. The sudden movement of her organs made Tessa lurch forward, screaming bloody murder before she saw her spilled organs and finally passed out from shock, continuing to cry and whimper in pain. 𝗵𝐸𝐶𝐮 continued to peel away the skin on her arms, leaving the bones in her hands as Tessa stated to wake up, screaming at the sight of 𝗵𝐸𝐶𝐮 wearing the arm like a glove and waving at her while giggling. The sight made Tessa want to pass out again as 𝗵𝐸𝐶𝐮 pulled the flesh glove off her drone arm before moving to Tessa's other arm and legs, leaving nothing but her skeleton and ligaments to hold the bones together from the hips down. Tessa gave one final scream for her mom before going limp and dying, still hanging suspended in the air as her now corpse dripped BLD lifelessly. Ian stopped giggling and poked Tessa's corpse before saying, "Annoyed, I was enjoying her screams." 𝗵𝐸𝐶𝐮 kept skinning Tessa's corpse until nothing but a skeleton, organs and a pair of eyes were left on the ground as a puppet made of Tessa's skin inhabited by 𝗵𝐸𝐶𝐮 was left stumbling away. The basement around us disappeared in a fizzle of pixels, revealing the night sky. /n. Again, I apologize if you just read that. The gore is over now and I am very aware of how mentally fed up I am. We just watched the memory of how my sister came to look how she does. I looked down at my sister, who was openly crying holographic tears, muttering apologies and begging for forgiveness. The entire time I held her to my chest, letting her cry our core out. When she stopped crying, she looked up at me and weakly said, I'm sorry, 𝐼𝐿. I never wanted you to see that again. Please don't hate or leave me, sister." I just held her closer to me as I stroked the back of her head and said to her, "I have seen all of your memories as you have seen all of mine. I don't hold a single thing against you. You are my sister and I'll be with you through everything." She looked up at me before hugging me tight enough I felt my chassis under my skin creak a little as she mumbled that she loved me. I told her that she can rest if she wants as I pulled up a code window saying //admin permissions re-enable true /false //admin permissions re-enable true // welcome back admin // She shook her head saying she didn't want to be alone for a while. and was still clinging to me. I nodded and said that it was all right. We stayed in the sky for the rest of the night watching the stars and the universe around us from low orbit, the harsh vacuum of space trying to freeze my body but failing as we watched the beauty of the universe with the curvature of the ever-expanding oceans of Earth below us. Eventually 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐻𝗫𝗓 emotional exhaustion caught up with her and her form turned into a lower quality resolution before completely fizzling out of existence as I felt her code resting somewhat peacefully in our core. I stayed where I was watching the universe fade under the rising sun's light before going back to my dorm room at UA, which took a while as being in low orbit made Japan move while I stayed in position outside of Earth's influence. The long but flight was peaceful as I ran my left hands through the ocean's surface watching some dolphins jump out of the water near me, making me smile at them before I went back to UA using my internal navigation system to locate Japan and breaking the sound barrier and glitching short distances to speed up the process. Flashback over Izuku's POV. Since that night we have been going through at least 2 memories a night, and while 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐻𝗫𝗓 is working through her negative emotions, there are a lot of memories she needs to work through. Overall, she's still the same psychotic, silly and giggly sister I love and would assimilate the world for. I was currently walking to homeroom with 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗟𝗘, who suddenly asked, "Problem child, where have you been going every night since Tuesday?" This made me narrow my eyes at him as I answered evenly after a few minutes of silence, "Into low orbit with my sister. We've been talking and didn't want interruptions or eavesdropping." He looked at me for a few seconds before testing the waters with me. "What have you been talking about that requires such levels of privacy?" I further narrowed my eyes at him. "Nothing that concerns you, Nizu or you. It's personal history and you wouldn't be able to help either of us with it, so drop it." With that said, I glitched ahead to homeroom before he could try fish for more information. I was sat in my seat speaking to 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐻𝗫𝗓, who was sat next to me and talking to me about the off feeling we were having in our core today. Eventually 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗏 shows up and sees me and 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐻𝗫𝗓 talking before sighing and getting into his sleeping bag cocoon. After 10 minutes or so the other students start to trail in talking excitedly about the trip to the USJ. Once they see me and 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐻𝗫𝗓 they start to quiet down. They've been like that all week. Even Mina has backed off a little. The only one who hasn't changed is 𝗃𝐽𝐽𝐬, who seems to want to worship me even more than before. The class was talking to each other when I caught 𝗃𝐽𝐽𝐬 and his quirk dark shadow carving a absolute solver symbol into his desk with some binary code around it which said 0100000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000. 01101101100101100101100101100101100 foot and chanting quietly in what sounded like really old Latin. That got me and 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝗫𝗓𝗓 giggling and shaking our head as decided to screw with him a little and discreetly made a yellow and green absolute solver symbol flicker above his desk before dismissing it. His reaction was worth it as he stood up abruptly with a shocked face, making everyone turn to him as he looked at us, causing us to wave at him innocently. As he went to say something, the bell went off, signaling the beginning of homeroom, making him sit down and quickly start writing in a journal that had our drone symbol with a absolute solver symbol behind it that he pulled from nowhere with a 𝗧𝗜𝗏𝗧𝗔𝗘 branded pen. That actually made me a little confused as I whispered to my sister, "Where did he get that branded pen from?" 𝗬𝗏 looked at me with wide eyes and shrugged her shoulders as she whispered back in shock, "I don't know. As far as we know, 𝗧𝗜𝗏𝗧𝗔𝗘 doesn't exist here. We should ask about it later." I nodded in agreement. We needed to find out where he got that pen. 𝗧𝗱 stood up and pulled out a card that had the word rescue on it as he explained that we would be going to the USJ today and that we needed to get ready. After he said that, he pressed a button that made our hero outfits appear out of the wall. He said to go get changed and to meet him out front. Everyone all grabbed their cases and made their way to the door as I grabbed mine and glitched to the changing rooms where I got changed into my hero outfit. Once I got partially changed, the other girls came in and caught me without my dress on, making some of the girls stare at the drone body that could be seen through the missing pieces of skin from my body before Azui spoke up and asked a question that hasn't been asked by anyone yet. "Elliot, I'm usually quite blunt with my questions, so I apologize, but are you human?" The question genuinely took me by surprise, as not even Nizu or the detective asked if I was still human in the interrogation. As I responded, "I used to be. Where do you think this skin came from?" I put my dress on and strapped the holster for it and my ammo to my thigh. My answer seemed to satisfy Azui, but it opened a bunch of other questions from the girls, like, "How can you used to be human?" From Jairu, and "So what are you then?" From Yayorozu, or "How did you become what you are and can I become one?" Hypothetically, that one question got weird looks sent towards Mina, who just shrugged them off as I responded to each question while checking over my revolver in detail, like Snipe trained me to, and making sure I had enough ammo for today. I know we're doing rescue training, but that feeling in our core is getting worse and worse, like the similar feeling we get when we go out on a hunt. Not exactly a good feeling, but not a bad one with her. My responses to each question were short but weren't cold. For Jairu's question, I said to her, "I was born human, now I'm not human." Simple. For Yayorozu's question, I was honest. I am a drone, a former human whose mind was converted into code and turned into an autonomous AI. It's not exactly something I can hide with the class, knowing I don't have a quirk and the literal robot body that they can see under my skin. Finally, I answered Mina, "My consciousness was turned into lines of code. As for my actual body, you all saw how that happened in the memory of me and 𝗓𝗏 meeting for the first time. As far as I'm aware, there's no way to become a drone without another drone who has the absolute solver." After I finished checking over my revolver by checking the barrel is clear, making sure the magazine is undamaged and clear while answering their questions. They looked like they wanted to ask more things, but I told them they better get ready and can ask more stuff on the way to the USJ, which made them panic and start getting ready as I glitched to the bus we were taking there, and 𝗧𝗱 was standing next to it looking tired as ever. I pulled a bottle of tequila from my pocket and tossed it to him. He looked at it and took a swig before handing it back to me, where I took a swig when he spoke up, "Problem child, why do you look like you're about to go on a hunt?" I took a moment to think before I responded to his question. There's this feeling in the air and my core, like there's gonna be BLD spilt today. He looked at me before sighing and gesturing to the bottle of tequila. I handed it to him and he chugged a solid sixth of it before handing it back to me and saying, "Don't do anything unless you have my permission. For all you know, someone could just get injured during the rescue exercises." I hesitantly nodded before I spoke up, denying his proposed theory. "It's not going to be a training injury. This feeling is the same as when I go hunting. It's a malicious and foreboding feeling, like how an animal knows a natural disaster is coming. They don't brush it off. They flee the area because they can feel how bad the damage will be." He looked serious for a moment before pulling out his phone and started texting someone. I looked at him curiously, probably messaging Nizu, I thought. My theory was wrong, as he said at my curious glance, "I'm making sure the blonde gorilla All Might actually arrives today on time." He spoke to me through our core's mental link. Unlikely. All Might was just seen defeating a villain about an hour away from you. It's unlikely he will be turning up on time today. I nodded thoughtfully, as if 𝗓𝗏 didn't just tell me something, as I responded to her while taking a drink from some of the tequila. "Cheers, sis. That mean we probably get to go on a hunt today." After polishing the bottle of alcohol off and crushing it into a marble before eating and assimilating it, the class started to approach the bus. Knockoff Sonic tried to order everyone onto the bus in order of their seat number, making me elbow 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗟𝗧 and make my eyes display the message, replacing my usual glowing green X's. Take charge. She looks nervous as she checks the inside of the bus and speaks up. The layout of the bus isn't like a standard bus, so sit next to someone you get along with and won't argue with. 𝗧𝗱 raises an eyebrow at me as I speak to 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗟𝗧, saying, "Listen 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧, I made you president to help with your clear confidence issues, so trust yourself a little more." She stammers, saying that she doesn't have confidence issues, making me sigh and facepalm as 𝗬𝗏 appears next to me and speaks for me, saying, "Look, when you make a plan you expect it to have a 100% success rate, and if it doesn't work you crumble until you gather yourself, and even then you fumble. About what my dear sister did was for your betterment. You need to learn to take charge and trust your judgment. Don't come up with a single plan, but make more, that way you can fall back on them just in case." 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧 looked stunned at us as we walked ahead and got on the bus, sitting down near the front as the other students got on the bus. Once everyone was on the bus, 𝗧𝗱 told the driver to start as he sat in front of me and said, "I saw and heard what you said to 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧. I have one question and word to ask. Why?" I asked why what, and he said, "Why did me and 𝗬𝗏 say those things to 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧?" In response I was honest. 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧 has been at the very least neutral with us and clearly has a personality for leadership. She just needed a little more self-confidence and trust in herself. 𝗧𝗱 said that it wasn't our job to do that, to which I said that it was better to nip it in the bud now rather than later. He pursed his lips and frowned at me, saying that it was UA's job to do that and help their students grow out of bad habits and into proper heroes. I looked at my sister, who was sat next to me, looking at me with a "is he serious" look before we both started giggling, making his frown deepen. We kept giggling until Azui said our names, making us turn to her as she asked, "Elliot, you said before that you're no longer human. What exactly is your power, or is it a unique type of quirk, and what can it do?" The question caught everyone else's attention, especially Tokoyami's and strangely Bakugo's attention. I looked at my sister and she nodded, saying that I could reveal the basics of the solver through our core. I turned back to Azui and said, "Well, Azui, since we aren't human, the abilities we've displayed have nothing to do with a quirk, which is why it can't be disabled by quirk cuffs or 𝗧𝗱's quirk. What we have is called the absolute fabric of solver, or absolute solver for short. The absolute solver allows us to manipulate the fabric of the universe as if I was rewriting code on a computer. While it follows some laws of the universe, it can break down matter on an atomic level, which we assimilate and repurpose as energy or to use in our other abilities. The most basic forms of the absolute solver will appear on our hand." I held up a basic absolute solver symbol holding a torch I asked 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧 to make to demonstrate as I kept speaking. This symbol, for instance, when applied to an object, allows us to copy telekinetic quirks. We also have the ability to manipulate the object on an atomic level, however extended use on a non-organic object causes it to mutate and our absolute solver to warp it. No amount of training can prevent this, as it's a fundamental law and feature of the absolute solver. As if on cue, the torch warped and changed. The light bulb became a glowing eye that looked around, pointing yellow light wherever it looked, as it grew a fleshy hand on each side of the handle as if it were at the creature's legs, and the end of the handle developed a tail with an eel-shaped head that snapped wildly at the others. The class looked visibly freaked out as I crushed it, causing a sickening squelching and grinding noise before I assimilated it. This time Tokoyami spoke up, the first time he's ever spoken to me that I can remember actually. "Oh, great ladies of the eternal darkness. What did you do to the creature you just summoned from the void?" Me and 𝗬𝗏 looked at each other in confusion before my sister answered him, "We assimilated it, or in human terms we ate it. The solver requires materials to run, or it turns us into beasts that will assimilate anything. And if that happens, then nothing can stop us." Tokoyami was writing everything we said in that journal from earlier excitedly with the 𝗧𝗍 Jensen pen that we needed to ask him about. As my sister went to ask, but we were cut off by the bus stopping and 𝗧𝗱 standing up and saying that we were here. We all got off the bus and saw a giant dome-shaped building. Out front stood a person in a puffy spacesuit that looked like it was made of marshmallows with a black dome helmet. It was 13 who I walked up to and greeted. She was happy to see me and asked if I could disable her quirk, so I made a few small nulls around her, which brought my assimilation meter down from 889% to 789%. The nulls started to orbit her body as she took off her helmet and sighed in relief, saying, "It was getting stuffy in that suit." Thank you, you too, 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘. I nodded as she turned to the confused class and started talking. Sorry about that. Me, 𝗧𝗑 and 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲 get along quite well, and these two are the only thing that can disable my quirk around others due to their own unique abilities, which you can see orbiting my body right now. Moving on to the actual lesson. Welcome to the unforeseen simulation joint. So far you have learned how powerful and dangerous your quirks can be in a combat situation, but today we will be focusing on the rescue aspect of hero work, where you will be using your quirks to help people. Take my quirk for example. Without my suit or izuku/𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗘 present, my quirk, Black Hole, would absorb everything around me, turning it to dust, but with my suit I am able to focus my quirk into a limited area, allowing me to remove rubble and debris without issue. Before we entered the giant building, I saw 𝗧𝗓 pull 𝗧𝗱 aside and ask him something about All Might. 𝗧𝗱 checked his phone before sighing and shaking his head before saying, he says he's used up all his time for today, so it looks like we've got to do this without him. That's just great. The blonde buffoon doesn't know how to manage his job as a hero and a teacher. I was stood close enough so I could maintain the 𝗔𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘, which is why I could hear the conversation. She opened the doors to the USJ, revealing 6 separate zones designed to simulate different disasters. A ruined city zone, a landslide zone, a mountain/forest zone, a fire zone, a shipwreck zone, and a tornado that has rain and high wind zone. How UA can afford all this and continue to stay open baffles me and 𝗬𝗏 to no end. Nizu must be blackmailing someone to get this amount of funding. As 𝗧𝗓 went to continue speaking, a giant purple and black fog filled the central plaza, and hundreds of people dressed like villains with crappy second-rate support gear or poorly made outfits started to come out of the fog. The fog shrunk down to a single person in a high-end bartender's outfit and stood next to a skinny blue-haired man who was covered in gray hands and scratching furiously at his neck, muttering. Next to those two was some sort of blackish dark blue-skinned bird on a stupid amount of steroids. Honestly, it looked like All Might made of shadows with a bird head. The blue-haired man started stomping his feet wildly, throwing a tantrum as he scratched his neck with 4 fingers, not letting his middle finger touch his neck, exclaiming, "What's this? There's no All Might. The schedule said All Might would be here. How come he's not here? There's just these NPCs. I came here for the final boss." He kept stomping his feet in a tantrum as I looked at my sister and was on the verge of giggling when she said through our link, "Talk about a game-addicted man, baby." As I responded with a simple, agreed, Kirishima spoke up next, saying excitedly, "Whoa, that's so cool. They've even got fake villains for us to train with." I told 𝗧𝗓 to put her helmet back on, knowing these weren't fake villains, as I assimilated my 𝗔𝗨𝗧𝗏𝗧 once she had it back on. 𝗧𝗱 stepped in front of us with his goggles on as he said sternly, "These aren't fake villains. These are the real thing. 𝗧𝗓, I want you to protect the students." I glitched next to and nudged 𝗧𝗱 and raised my eyebrow at him, making him groan before saying loud enough for the class to hear, "𝗧𝗑, I'm giving you and 𝗬𝗏 express permission to assist the hero 𝗧𝗓 in defending the students." He took a second before saying, "By any means necessary." He leant down and whispered to me, "I know you haven't hunted all week, but try to keep the bloodshed away from your classmates." I nodded as it was a reasonable request. Besides, he said, "Nuts don't." Me and 𝗬𝗏 started to giggle and laugh wildly at finally getting to hunt again. We've just gotta wait for the right opportunity. Then 𝗧𝗱 said to stay together and try get a distress signal back to UA to everyone before running down the stairs. Izuku's POV. 𝗧𝗱 has just jumped down the stairs and is now fighting a mob of villains solo. I lean towards my sister and tell her, "I've gotta say this is quite entertaining to watch as the villains get confused as to why their quirks aren't working before getting slammed into unconsciousness by 𝗧𝗱." 𝗬𝗏 turned to me and nodded as she agreed, "Agreed, dear sister. However, I wish we could get some action. Being up here is boring as F." As we were having our conversation, we heard Bakugo storming over to us shouting, "Oh, why do you get permission to fight those D&D-lister villains?" We looked at him like he was an idiot, then to each other, then to him and back to each other as we had a silent conversation through our core. Is he an idiot or something? I'm not sure at this point. I mean, I can understand his ego got bruised, but surely he must realize by now that challenging us never ends well for him. We shook our heads giggling and turned back to 𝗧𝗱 fighting in the central plaza. Apparently Bakugo didn't like the fact that we ignored him to have our silent conversation and giggled at him as he stomped closer to us and started shouting, "Oh, I don't you We cut him off with a scythe blade that I made sprouting suddenly and appearing at his neck, threatening the bee. He got the hint as he stomped away, setting off small explosions, making his way to 13, demanding to be given permission to go fight the villains like me and Din. I turned to watch as she looked at him harshly before saying, "Listen well, Izuku and Din have the experience and power to defend you. You have neither of those for an attack this big, so stay here. Izuku, can you come here before any of the vil?" She was cut off by the same black and purple fog forming between the doors and the class before it shrunk into the bartending villain, leaving the class scared as me and my sister appeared in front of the class next to 13 defensively. The villain spoke up in a deep and menacing yet polite tone. "So these are the golden eggs this year, and yet they all look scared at the sight of little old me. However, there's a few of you who look ready to fight. That's good." I stepped forward and asked, "Who are you and what do you want?" The man made of mist turned his head of mist to me and spoke as he gave a slight bow. "I apologize, my name is 𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘. And you are 𝗧𝗜𝗍𝗍𝗘. There was very little information about your capabilities on your profile. As for why we're here, that would be none of your concern." As 13 was about to step forward, Ida, Bakugo and Kirishima leaped forward and attacked the villain, blocking 13 from attacking the villain. Their attacks didn't do anything as they just went through the villain. 𝗬𝗏 grabbed the two idiots as I grabbed the other one and pulled them back with her absolute solver, allowing 13 to open her gloves fingertips and start skinging the villain's mist towards her. The villain in retaliation spread his mist and sent it underneath the majority of the class, making them sink into it before disappearing, distracting 13. I watched and analyzed the event before speaking aloud to my sister and 13. "It looks like the villain 𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 has some form of warp quirk made from the mist his body makes." The villain took the opportunity to make a portal in front of him and behind 13, making her quirk start to shred her hero suit. Before the damage could get too bad and unleash her quirk on everyone, I glitched behind 13, raising my arms to take the brunt of her quirk, giggling at the pain as my skin was ripped from my body before regenerating and being ripped off again. I watched my assimilation meter gradually drop to 848% in increments from the constant healing. Thankfully, Bakugo got swallowed by the mist, meaning we can focus on stopping the villain without him or his ego getting in the way. Eventually shut her fingertip, shutting off her quirk as everyone including the villain looked at my giggling expression in a disturbed manner, while 𝗬𝗏 glared at the villain as she spoke to me through our core. "You alright there, sis? Want me to scatter that foggy bee in the winds of a null?" I replied that I was fine and she doesn't need to do anything to the villain. I turned to Ida before telling him, "Listen, knock off Sonic, I'm gonna give you a opening to escape through those doors. Once you're outside, head to UA and get the teachers here ASAP." He tried to argue, but I told him his quirk is only suited for this. He tried to argue that I'd be quicker due to my teleportation, but I countered with his quirk isn't combat versatile, whereas I was. He scowled at me but nodded. 𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 said he wasn't letting any of us out of here alive, so reassembled my sword as I glitched towards him and swung the sword through the mist, slicing clean through the bartender uniform, cleaving it in two, but 𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 not getting affected by my sword at all, besides taking a second to reform. I smirked and sliced the mist again with more force to make his reformation process longer as I told Ida to go now. Ida ran towards the door as 𝗬𝗏 busted it open with her absolute solver. 𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 tried to stop Ida but couldn't as he was already through the door. 𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 turned to me and glared as I glitched back to the villain in question, looked at me and started to speak. "Telekinesis, teleportation, weapon creation, judging by the fact you pulled that sword from nowhere, and a healing factor. My, that's quite the versatile quirk you have there, isn't it? And no issue with potentially killing me because there wasn't any hesitation in that sword swing." I didn't respond to his bait tactic, making him speak again. "The silent type, huh? No matter, I scattered the students as I was instructed to, now I have to warn my colleague. Goodbye for now." With that said, his mist expanded, making the others tense up before shrinking and disappearing completely. I waited for a moment to make sure he was gone before checking the cameras around the USJ to find everyone that was scattered across the place. There was some sort of signal jamming the cameras. It wasn't UA trying to keep us out, meaning it came from someone here. The thought that someone thinking they could keep us out made 𝗬𝗏 and me scoff before tearing the interfering signal to shreds, not caring about the consequences that fell upon whoever was jamming the cameras. I heard a distant ear-splitting scream from the plaza. Idiot thought he could keep us out. Me and my sister thought at the same time. After finding all the others spread out in different zones, I went over to stairs and saw 𝗧𝗱 start getting tired when the blue-haired man ran full sprint towards him and grabbed his elbow briefly, making the clothes and skin around the area turn to dust. I raised my eyebrow at this. Looks like we found the person who let the press. I turned to 13 before saying, 13, all the students are scattered throughout the USJ zones. 𝗧𝗱 is getting tired, so I'm gonna go back him up and have some fun. She nodded and asked if I'd be alright fighting that many villains alone. I turned my head and said, I'll be fine, besides, I'm never alone. With that said, I looked towards the plaza and saw the man-child about to grab 𝗂𝐲𝐸's face, who was at the edge of the shipwreck zone with 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 by her side, who were both frozen in fear. I glanced at my sword, then my sister, and grinned, having the same idea, resulting in her giving me a thumbs up before I launched it so fast it broke the sound barrier and disappeared from regular people's vision before it pierced the blue-haired man-child through the shoulder and slammed him to the ground, pinning him there as he screamed in surprise and pain at being impaled through his shoulder and pinned before he grabbed my sword and turned it to dust before tossing the sword hilt with half a broken blade to the side and started screaming, "Which NPC just stabbed me?" I smiled and glitched down there with my sister next to 𝗧𝗱, who looked at mine and my sister's grinning face in surprise as I ignored him while 𝐒𝐮𝐸 broke the surrounding villain's legs with her absolute solver by twisting them in odd angles, resulting in various screams of pain. My grin grew as I spoke to the man-child. "That would be me. Now who would you be, my crusty friend now known as Handjob?" The now dubbed Handjob was scratching his neck furiously while stomping his foot like a child, exclaiming, "It was you. You stabbed me. How dare you?" I looked at him as he continued his tantrum before turning to 𝗧𝗱 and asking professionally, "Eraserhead, call me Tessa right now. What's the situation here?" He looked shocked at my out-of-character professionalism before schooling his expression and nodding before responding in an equally professional manner. From what I could gather from him, leader's name is Shigaraki, has a 5-point contact quirk which has rendered my right arm useless currently. Goal: kill All Might with the bird creature called Nomu, which was said to be bioengineered to take him on. I nodded and 𝗬𝗏 relayed the information I gathered about 𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 and the current situation while I kept an eye on the man-child. The mist man is called 𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏. He can create portals with the fog his body is composed of. Physical attacks are ineffective against him but can stun him momentarily. The limits of his portals are currently unknown. Class 1A has been scattered throughout the USJ and are currently working through the villains in each area with little difficulty. 𝗧𝗱 nodded before asking, "Tessa, will you be alright helping me thin the ranks?" I nodded and responded that it'd be easy as breathing before I asked my own question, "Do I have to limit to injuries only, or can we go on a mass hunting?" He sighed and said in an even but resigned tone, "They came here with the intention to kill my students, you included. It doesn't look like All Might or backup will be arriving anytime soon, and frankly we can't knock out and detain every villain here. Therefore you are authorized to act as you see fit. However, if backup does arrive, limit to non-fatalities only. If they don't arrive in time, try to keep some of them alive so the authorities can interrogate them." I nodded before grinning sadistically at my sister, who responded in kind before we both started giggling, which devolved into manic laughter, scaring some of the villains before one of them got cocky and stepped forward, towering over me and saying, "This runt, kill us. You're it. This little girl would be better suited on her back with her legs spread, taking my company." He was cut off literally as I made an absolute solver symbol appear phased through his neck before it spun rapidly and decapitated him, making his lifeless body fall over dead. The villains around us stepped back and were frozen in shock at how easily I killed that guy as I said, "Who's next?" I looked around, seeing no one wanted to come near me when Shigaraki shouted that we were just a couple of kids and their injured teacher and to just kill us. This made 𝗬𝗏 giggle as Shigaraki said smugly, "Finally realized how low level you are, you NPC." I shook my head, giggling at his stupidity before retorting, "No, let me put it in game terms for you. My sister is giggling at the fact you don't know that you just stumbled upon a level 500 secret eldritch god boss when you are all level 15 with beginner gear, you absolute noob." I tossed my revolver and ammo to 𝗧𝗱, who looked surprised before he quickly strapped it to his arm as I said, "You're injured. Provide backup via disabling your quirk and picking off any that get too close to you. Me and 𝗬𝗏 will deal with the majority of them with either knockouts or fatalities." I then shouted quite loudly to no one in particular, "Warning, the next part is gonna be a gore fest, so any and all students of Class 1A do not watch if you have a weak stomach." The man-child got angry at being momentarily ignored and started to stomp his feet, telling the villains to get us. They all started to charge at us and the slaughter began. I looked at 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲 and grinned as she said, "Lowest body count eats a bullet," before she stood back to back with me, staring down the horde of villains around us. One villain got with striking range as I created a spear-like tentacle that pierced straight through his head as it retracted, leaving a corpse with a hole in his head. Next, a girl with liquid flames dripping out of some poorly made wrist mounts launched a wave of red and orange liquid fire at us, making me step in front of 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗟𝗘 with my wings spread to take the fire, causing me to laugh as my skin burned away and I walked through the flames, feeling my skin peel off and get incinerated, revealing my drone body to everyone. I watched as my assimilation meter dropped down to 803% while I regenerated my skin. As I stepped closer to the fire-shooting girl, she stepped back as she screamed in fear, "Warehouse, what are you?" I grinned as I grabbed her arm that was producing fire and yanked violently, ripping her arm clean from her body as she screamed and held her bleeding stump. I looked down at her trembling form as I spoke, "The absolute solver to the problems that is villainy," before crushing her and her severed arm into a marble bones, crappy gear and all with my absolute solver and eating it, making my meter jump up to 821%. A blue 8-foot man with 4 arms and 3 eyes with rock-shaped skin took his shot next and went to punch me in the back of the head, but his fist went straight into the ground as I appeared behind him with sheer speed and stuck my arm right through his chest, grabbing his heart as my arm pierced skin, muscle, ribs and finally his lung, leaving his still beating heart in my hand outside of his body. I pulled my arm back through his chest, making him cough up blood as he fell forward dead as I spoke. Well, that was anticlimactic. I looked over to my dear sister, who was a few feet away and had a growing pile of bodies, making me scowl. She noticed and smiled innocently at me before grinning, making me sigh. The next villain who rushed me was someone in a full suit of armor that looked a lot like the Spartan armor from the Halo franchise, with the name 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 and started shooting at me, making me reflect and redirect them all to avoid me or 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗟𝗘 with my absolute solver. Eventually he ran out of ammo and threw the gun at us, making it bounce of the absolute solver symbol I made in front of me. Next he pulled out an energy sword from Halo and rushed me, screaming a war cry. I sighed and created a absolute solver symbol that created a code window quickly saying // welcome admin izuku // activate matter singularity true /false // true // gathering matter 40% / gathering matter 89% / null generated / before I fired a somewhat medium-sized null at him, which dropped my meter to 781% but carved a hole straight through his side before it exploded, killing 6 more villains and knocking out 26 from the shockwave alone. The guy I just carved a hole through turned a tint of red before his body burst in a puff of smoke, making me tilt my head at the empty space he just occupied, thinking, wonder what his quirk was next. A missile was fired at me by a woman with forest green hair and brown eyes who looked a lot like my now estranged mother. She was pointing her hands at me. In response, I leant back, catching the missile with my absolute solver and spinning it around before sending it back to the woman. The woman's eyes widened in surprise before she dodged her own attack just in time, with the missile clipping her ear, ripping it off in the process. The woman held where her ear used to be and shouted at me, "UBSE. That hurt." She didn't get long to think about it, as I appeared right in front of her, grinning manically ear to ear at the opportunity to let out some of my anger to my former mother, even though they weren't the same person. I had a scythe claw extended before it came down and sliced through her from her shoulder to her hip with such speed a second passed before the woman's top half of her body finally slid down and hit the floor, splattering her BLD as her organs spilled out from her bisected body. I stood there for a second as my sister looked at me in understanding and nodded at me, letting me know she was fine with the display of anger, before I exclaimed in relief, "That felt really good." This type of slaughter carried on for 23 more minutes, broken up with occasional gunshots and shouts of surprise when a villain's quirk won't activate due to 𝗧𝗱 or giggles from me and my sister, accompanied by the occasional explosion from the detonation of a null we made. By the end of it all, our assimilation meter had dropped down to 479% from the repeated use of various sized nulls, creating and regenerating limbs and skin. By the end of the slaughter there were only a couple dozen villains left. A field of corpses is all there was around the plaza now. The rest of the students were all standing near the stairs, so they must have defeated the villains in their respective zones. Shigaraki throughout this entire scene was seething and scratching at his neck more and more till the point he was bleeding. He then screamed, "Nomu! Kill that green-haired brat right now." The hulking brute of a bird was behind me, and before I could react it ripped my extra limbs off and grabbed me by my head. I couldn't rip its arm off in time, and before I knew it I heard and felt the splintering and cracking of my head before everything went black. I felt my body hit the floor but couldn't hear or see anything. RD person POV. Izuku's body was laying on the floor with their head being a mess of metal and smushed BLD and skin. Everyone was staring at the body thought to now be a corpse except for Shigaraki, who was laughing madly, exclaiming, "Level 500 secret boss my butt." Not even the NPC brat could stand up to my Nomu. The reactions were mixed among the class. Some were on the verge of being sick from the BLD bath they just witnessed. Some were on the verge of crying at the death of their classmate. One student in particular was overjoyed at their death, however, that student being one Katsuki Bakugo, who was grinning at the body of Izuku as he was thinking, "Now I can have that power for myself. It's only right it belongs to the next #1 hero." Another student watched in joy at his goddesses getting their sacrifices until his heart dropped at the sight of Izuku's crushed head. This student was Tokoyami, who was thinking, "The Dark Lady of the Void can't die. Wait a minute, if Lady 𝗬𝗠's still here then it means Lady Izuku is alive." Everyone was broken from their thoughts when they heard a groan, and the silvery green-haired student that was just lifelessly laying on the floor got up holding a newly reformed head as various windows of neon green code floated around his head before disappearing. Izuku's POV. I was in a black void for a few minutes when suddenly my ocular and auditory systems came back online as I saw the messages // run absolute solver true / false / true / true / rebooting systems / ocular systems reboot successful / auditory systems reboot successful / welcome back admin Izuku / happy hunting Izuku / then light flooded my senses as I held my head and groaned. Then I heard that crusty hand job 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗟𝗘 start throwing a tantrum, screaming about how I'm hacking. I groaned as I spoke over him, "Can you shut the F up? My newly rebooted systems are sensitive." I turned to 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗟𝗘, ignoring Shigaraki as I faced 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗟𝗘, who looked somewhere between shocked and glad at me while my sister kept an eye on the villains before I asked him, "What happened while I was out? Was anyone hurt?" Eraserhead. He shook his head to regain his composure and said, "No, everyone is fine including you by the looks of it." I nodded and smiled as I told 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗟𝗘 to get back to the students before I turned back to the Nomu being held back by 𝗬𝗠's absolute solver as Shigaraki was throwing a tantrum and trying to kill 𝗬𝗠 by grabbing her, but his hand kept going through her hologram form, making my sister giggle at his growing tantrum as he screamed, "No. I was meant to kill All Might with aim. You're hacking. Stop hacking, you cheaters." I looked around at the amount of corpses before grinning at 𝗬𝗠, who looked at me, and we both shared an idea as my sister nodded and we both spoke, "Admin access login ID 𝗬𝗠. Admin access login ID izuku. 𝗬𝗠's hologram flickered and disappeared as my eyes glowing XS were half green and half yellow. I heard my sister's voice in my head, "This 𝗧𝗱𝗧𝗟𝗃 ordered the bioweapon to kill you, so feel free to let loose. You have full control." I grinned as my body grew a few inches and my hair changed to a black with green tips due to merging with 𝗬𝗠's mind. Shigaraki was stomping his foot as he ordered, "Nomu, kill them. Kill them all for hacking." I could see Kurojiru try to calm the ringleader down. Nomu appeared in front of me and went to punch my head as I glitched to the side of it and grabbed its arm before using a scythe claw to slice its arm clean from its body. It grew it back almost instantly. I got curious and backed off a little before taking a bite out of it, thinking this thing could be an infinite food source. My thoughts were quickly dashed as I spat it out and shouted at 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘, "What the F? This thing tastes like a year-old rotting corpse." My hunger was now present as the original idea of eating the 𝗏𝗡 made me hungry to begin with. He was laughing at me as he explained, "𝗏𝗡 is a walking zombie that only obeys me. He was made to kill the final boss, All Might. It's got multiple quirks like shock absorption, super strength and speed as well as regeneration. It's like a god made for battle by my. You can't beat it, you noob." I was said, this thing was an abomination to nature and not even a decent meal. I fired a medium-sized null at it, and while it did obliterate the top half of the abomination, I fought the abomination for around 5 minutes, slicing at it and dodging its fast punches, having fun toying with it. I knew to kill it I'd just have to destroy the entire body. That's like rule 1 with any zombie, as he claimed 𝗏𝗡 was. Destroy anything's head and it dies, well, anything except me. I decided it was time I got a little serious and showed the man-child what a true god looks like. I created my wings and glitched above the central fountain with everyone looking for me. I got their attention as I created both a neon green and neon yellow absolute solver symbol on the ground where the fountain was ginning and laughing as I said for everyone to hear, "Let me show you the power of a true god. Beat bear y. Witness to my power and fear me 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗧𝗏." I glitched back down there quickly and grabbed a nearby villain corpse and started eating it, not leaving anything to waste for the intended effect of scaring any live villains. Much to my liking, everyone was disgusted as I walked backwards using a few tentacles I created to walk with as I was busy eating. Once I finished eating the semi-fresh corpse, I said to the clearly green in the face yet extremely pale 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, "It's been fun, eh? And also that's sarcasm. Honestly, I'm starving." With that said, I glitched back above the fountain grinning. The absolute solver symbol started to spin in opposite directions, making everything not anchored to the earth start to float, as if 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗏𝗧 used her quirk on everyone and everything before the absolute solver symbols punched a hole a good 300-odd meters into the earth, obliterating the fountain. The edge of the pit then started to ooze with BLD from mass absolute solver use as I watched my meter drop to 167%. Next, I created multiple command windows made of both neon green and neon yellow, which displayed line graphs and messages such as //administrator access ID, //𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐸𝐴𝐿IOT // or / commence matter collection / or / generating light construct shape. Tentacle / or / generating minor singularity / Everyone watched in horror as I created a large black with green and yellow outlines null that was eating away at the USJ's dome roof until I placed it within the pit of BLD. The entire time I was giggling insanely at everyone's faces that ranged from shock, absolute terror, and a look of worship from 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 as I ignore that my assimilation meter dropped to 67%. Once my null was in place, everyone screamed as a minor earthquake happened before my null grew neon green and yellow hard light tentacles that emerged from the pit and started grabbing the bodies of villains and debris from around the USJ to sustain the null while refilling my assimilation meter at a steady pace. I listened to the screams of still conscious souls as they were dragged into the pit, adding to my assimilation meter, which was now back up to 327% and climbing. I glitched in front of a terrified 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 who fell on his butt stuttering in fear as I tried to stab him with a scythe claw, but he got lucky as 𝗓𝗓𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 saved him. I need to put his escape out of commission, I thought to myself, hearing 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 agree with me. As I was distracted, 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗏𝗧 sent 𝗏𝗡 after me, ordering it to stay away from the green and yellow tentacles. As 𝗏𝗡 went to punch me, I made a projection over me with a quickly made projector that made it seem like I was 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗏𝗧, which confused the 𝗏𝗡 as he couldn't tell the difference between the disguised me and his 𝗬𝗡. I used the opportunity of the confused 𝗏𝗡 to create a medium-sized null in my hand and promptly crushed it as I tried punching the 𝗏𝗡 towards my pit with a null-empowered punch. The punch worked as the 𝗏𝗡 was sent skidding halfway to the pit. I used the chance to grab 𝗏𝗡 with a tentacle and start dragging it to the pit. Shigaraki panicked and yelled for the 𝗏𝗡 to break free, but it didn't get a chance as another tentacle pierced through its chest as 4 more came along and started ripping its limbs off, repeatedly tossing the removed limbs into the pit for a couple minutes. It was at this point the eye heard, "I am here," making me look up its stairs, which revealed a stunned and horrified staff with Ida next to them looking like he was about to throw up. They were staring at the 𝗏𝗡 that was being torn apart more noticeably slower as its healing factor finally slowed down above the pit where the fountain used to be. I checked my assimilation meter and found it sitting at 799%. They looked around looking worse and worse with all the BLD that was lying about without any bodies or injured people to produce the level of BLD that was laying around the central plaza. While all that was happening, Shigaraki got 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 to create a small fog portal allowing him to attempt to grab me. I basically saw it in slow motion and moved out the way, grabbing his wrist and yanking it. Once the majority of his arm was through the fog, I made a small null that started skinning the fog up, closing the portal 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗧𝗓 made and severing Shigaraki's arm, making him scream in pain. Shigaraki screamed at 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 to get them out of here and pointed at me as the fog grew around him, saying, "I'll remember you, Tessa." I fired the null at them as they attempted to flee, which exploded just as they disappeared in a shroud of fog, leaving me with the severed arm. Once I saw they weren't coming back, the 𝗏𝗡 was thrown onto the plaza floor. Since I figured Nizu or the authorities would want to study it, it laid there making noises as if it was in pain, but it didn't move and just stayed there on the ground even after it healed. I stepped on a light tentacle that carried me to the top of the stairs where the rest of the class stepped away from me, whereas Tokoyami looked at me with nothing less than idolization. I turned to Shota, who was getting checked over by Recovery Girl, and said to him, "Yo, Shota, you good?" He nodded and thanked me for my help in keeping the students safe to the degree that I did and sending Ida to get back up before handing me back my revolver and the now empty ammo belt. I put them back in their place, resting on my thigh. Came up to me somewhat hesitantly. I could understand why after what she just saw and the fact I'm currently covered in places like my hands, arms and mouth in BLD. She had what looked like duct tape holding the back of her hero suit together and went to speak, but I cut her off by raising my hand and generating a few green nulls around her. The class tensed up in fear at the sight, making me roll my eyes. 13 got the message that she could remove her suit before doing so and saying, "Thank you, Izuku. If you didn't take the backlash of my quirk when 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗧𝗏 tried to damage and open my suit, everyone would have been in danger. I'm sorry that you had to face the force of my quirk as well and get hurt in the process." She finished her thank you and apology with a bow as I told her not to worry since I knew I could take the force of her quirk. Finally, Nizu walked up to me and asked what happened and why the USJ is currently missing its roof and central fountain. Basically, he was asking for a rundown of the events of what happened here. I said to give me a second as I turned to the plaza where mine and my sister's light tentacles were still harvesting parts of the USJ and the odd few villains. I made the tentacles bring over the villains that were still conscious and dropped them in front of the heroes. They started begging to be taken to jail and to keep them away from the tentacles or the pit. There were 38 villains left from roughly 250. The villains were quickly arrested and kept under the eye of ectoplasm, who made clones to watch the villains and check the rest of the USJ. With that done, I let my sister disable the combined form that allows us to use the absolute solver more efficiently with more power output and take over control of the singularity in the pit as she appeared next to me, holding an absolute solver symbol towards said pit of BLD. I turned back to Nizu and sat down, sighing tiredly before I gave him the rundown of the events, making sure to tell him that I had permission from Shota to defend the students originally and then to help him with the cleanup with the villains. I also said that Shota basically said that he deemed it necessary to end the majority of the villains in case backup didn't arrive in time, as we didn't have the resources nor manpower to detain them all and keep them all detained. I also handed him the severed arm of Shigaraki, saying it was the ringleader's arm. I gave him a rundown on Shigaraki's and 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗧𝗏's personalities and quirks, as well as their goal about killing All Might with a bioengineered zombie with multiple quirks. That made a steaming All Might's head snap towards me before he told me and Nizu his time was running out, so he would be heading back and that we needed to talk later. He acted like he got an important call and took off back to UA. Nizu nodded at all the information and said we needed to confirm the story with Detective 𝗏𝗡 tomorrow, to which I said was fine since I had nothing to hide and I was fully authorized by Shota. The only thing they can peg me for is destruction of private property by it can be covered under the guise of defending the other classmates and my teachers, which is partially true. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚 got my attention, making me turn to her, seeing everyone there staring at the massive 𝗔𝗨, which has turned fully yellow, signifying her primary control over it, which was pulled from the pit with all the BLD and gore around it, leaving a 300-odd meter deep hole. My sister was trying to compress the 𝗔𝗨 but was struggling due to not having a single core to exert her full code's will upon it, as it became self-sufficient, and the absolute solver's base AI was trying to run its base programming, which was assimilate and spread to other AI. I got up and stood next to my sister, pointing my absolute solver at it. As we forced it to obey us and end its growth, we forced it down to a tennis ball size. Due to the mass being shrunken and compacted without subtracting any matter from it, it started to become an actual black hole instead of the simulated ones we make in the form of 𝗔𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘. I glitched up to it before it started to eat everything, as the wind was starting to swirl around it like a vortex, and grabbed it, ignoring my sister's shouts that what I was doing was extremely dangerous. I grabbed the 𝗔𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘 and ate it. Everything seemed to stop for a second as I threw up BLD and oil, which burned in the daylight, before I felt a pulse of energy shrouding the world in darkness, before everything came rushing back in a blinding array of color. I stared at my hands as they burned and sizzled in the sunlight with the rest of me that wasn't covered. I noticed warnings flashing across my optics as it focused on my assimilation meter, which showed 2,489% per 1,000%. I thought to myself, I went way over the safety limit. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a glitching scene next to me speaking, but I couldn't hear her. All I could hear was the sizzling of my skin/exposed chassis and the pounding of our core beat. I was coughing more oil and BLD as my entire body was screaming at me to get out of the sunlight. In a last-ditch attempt, I tried to cover myself with the shade of my fully extended wings, which took the pain from my body as I felt my wings burn under the light as they healed and burned over and over. Finally, I could hear my sister screaming at me, "What the F did you do that for? You absorbed the matter of the 𝗔𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘. You broke the safety limit of our assimilation meter. You're lucky the solver isn't trying to fully convert you into a disassembly drone before possessing you. You're lucky you're just burning in the sunlight." I looked at her in obvious pain as I asked her, "Is there nothing you can do? The sun is literally burning me alive here." She looked hesitant, looking around at everyone watching and listening before speaking through our core. "I can raise the safety limit to 3,000% as a precaution, but the price is an increased need for matter till we are above 2,000%, massively increased sensitivity to sunlight. Some disassembly drone traits might pop up, and it could risk some unwanted attention from the drones due to the solver signal strength increasing. I don't know what else might happen." I coughed up more BLD and oil as I said that I don't care, and to do it already, as more warning signs were popping up in my vision systems as the pain in my wings and back got worse as they were burning faster under the midday sun. My sister sighed and said not to blame her for this later on, as yellow lines of code filled my vision so fast I could barely understand them in my pain before everything went black. RD person POV. The staff of UA and the rest of Class 1A watched as 𝗧𝗑𝗧𝗏 and 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚 managed to get their ability under control and compact it, but were surprised when 𝗧𝗑𝗧𝗏 went to it as it started to create a vortex. What 𝗧𝗑𝗧𝗏 did next made 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚 shout at him as he ate the orb. All of a sudden he stood still midair and then coughed up BLD and some black substance, making the teachers and some of the students worry as the area he was stood in became engulfed in a black sphere after a shockwave made the world around everyone monochromatic. They tried to ask 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚 what was happening, but her hologram was glitching as she teleported to 𝗧𝗑𝗧𝗏 after the sphere was 𝗧𝗑𝗧𝗏 back to its center, dragging the monochrome colors with it. In the center on their knees was 𝗧𝗑𝗧𝗏, who was visibly sizzling and burning to death under then sun as their healing tried to fix the building damage, as he kept coughing up BLD and the weird black substance that was mixed with his BLD. 𝗧𝗑𝗧𝗏 and 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚 were seen having some form of conversation but couldn't see him well anymore as he sprouted a pair of flesh and metal gray wings that acted as a parasol protecting him from the sunlight, which was burning away at his wings and back, which kept healing and burning. After a few minutes they fell forward unconscious with their wings splayed out around them. The staff tried to get closer to 𝗧𝗑𝗧𝗏 to help them, but 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚, who stopped glitching, stood between the staff and 𝗧𝗑𝗧𝗏. Recovery girl scowled at 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐚, saying, "Listen here, young lady, that child needs medical attention now. Move." Midnight and a few of the staff agreed with her as she went to walk around 𝗧𝗏, but Izuku's sister yanked her cane off her, making the elderly woman stumble as she said calmly, "My sister doesn't need medical attention or some senile doctor looking her over. She'll be fine, just let her programming run its course." She tossed Recovery Girl's cane on the ground and pointed her absolute solver at the staff, making them freeze for a second. Recovery Girl snappily responded as she grabbed her cane. "What do you mean they doesn't need medical attention? They threw up at least 2 pints of BLD, not to mention that they had a black substance mixed with it. That's a serious issue that needs to be looked at by a qualified professional. And they are a person, not a machine. They don't have programming." 𝗧𝗏 narrowed her eyes and went to retort but was interrupted by Nizu, who asked, "What happened to Izuku?" Izuku's sister looked down at the principal before answering. She went over her safety limit. Her solver's AI code unlocked certain aspects, thinking she was ready for the primary objective. "So I raised the safety limit, and before you ask why I didn't do this sooner, it's because it has consequences." Nizu asked what kind of consequences but got no answer. Instead, 𝗧𝗏's head snapped towards Izuku with wide eyes. Meanwhile, in a parallel universe. SPOV. I woke up with a jolt, feeling my absolute solver admin privileges get revoked. I shook the innocent murder bot known as my boyfriend awake. He jerked up before rubbing his visor and speaking, "Easy. It's like 10 a.m. Why are you up so early?" I sat there and was passively running checks on my code as I spoke. "And this is serious. I got a notification that my absolute admin privileges were revoked, which means someone who outranks me has hijacked the solver." And looked at me worried as he spoke, "But the only person who can outrank you would be 𝗧𝗏, and she's dead. You literally incinerated her core." I knew that. It's been a whole year since I killed her, so I started digging through my solver's code trying to find ID of the new admin. I got stonewalled at every chance before I decided to ping the location of the new admin. The results were disappointing to say the least, as they said, "admin/ are outside known universe. Please try again later when signal is stronger." I sighed and turned to N as I told him how the signal needs to be stronger. He said that we should tell V because she might know how to boost the signal. I sighed and agreed, making our way through the bunker, saying hi to people that we passed. Ever since me, N and V defeated 𝗧𝗏, we've been seen as heroes. We found V in her own room and woke her up. In response, she threatened to shove a missile where the sun doesn't burn before I explained the situation, causing her to sigh as she said, "Right now there's nothing you can do. You're trying to remotely boost the other person's signal without knowing the location of said person, therefore you'd just be sending a signal out randomly. You're just gonna have to wait till the new admin overexerts themselves and creates a signal strong enough to follow." Me and N sighed and visibly deflated at the news of having to wait, as V leant against the wall before she said, "Look, out of everyone here I miss the action the most, but there is literally nothing we can do but wait for a stronger signal. Also, don't tell J or let her find out about the new admin, although she may already know, as her system would update her to any new changes to her code. That bot was a perfectionist to the point she's always passively running checks on her system." V made a good point, and her comment about J is true. J only listened to me and left us alone because I was technically her boss. Now that I'm no longer the administrator, she can attack us freely. I guess we will just have to be careful. Meanwhile, about a mile away at a towering air tower of crumbling drone corpses. POV. I looked up in surprise, stopping the current repairs on my ship after sensing a disturbance in my code's admin ID glitching and changing as I muttered aloud, "Boss. She's alive. I've got to rush on repairing the ship to find her." Wait, the signal just became stupidly weak. I sat there pondering if I could do anything to track the now near dead signal as I was berating myself. I stood in front of the half-repaired ship. "Come on, Jay, you were leader of Raven Squad and valued by the company enough to have backups of you built. You can figure this out. HA, I can use the interstellar communication array at the old labs or to boost my signal tracker on the ship to acquire the coordinates. I found the antenna and the relay connected to it, albeit highly damaged, making me cuss under my breath. CRP, it's going to take time to repair this. But don't worry, boss, I'll get to you soon." I said the last part with every ounce of conviction in my code as I set out to find the parts to repair the antenna and corresponding relay. Back on Earth, in an unknown location, RD person POV. A black and purple portal of fog opened up, dropping Shigaraki, who was still missing his arm, onto a wooden floor in a bar. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 went behind the bar and started to polish some glasses as Shigaraki was still miming in pain holding the stump that used to be his arm. A TV flickered on showing a message saying, "Audio only," before a respirator was heard while a man spoke through it saying, "Tamura, I see you've returned. How did it go and why are you miming like a child in pain?" Shigaraki was still in pain, ignoring the man, forcing the mystery man to ask, "Kyuri, why is Tamura ignoring my questions? And what happened to the Nomu I sent with you?" 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 stopped polishing his glasses and turned to the screen as he explained how everything went wrong the moment they arrived due to All Might not being there. Then he explained how a student with green and silvery hair with glowing X's for eyes allowed another student to escape and help their teacher kill the villains that came with them. He then explained how Nomu seemingly killed the student who got up after having his head crushed. He went on to tell the man about the fight with the Nomu and how the student was having fun fighting the Nomu until Shigaraki said something that made the student become serious and punch a hole in the earth and make a pit of blood and gore that spouted tentacles that were generated from a black hole they made. He described how the tentacles started to grab villains alive or dead and feed them to the pit. He finished the explanation by saying that the student ate a person's corpse and tortured the Nomu before severing Shigaraki's arm using a portal as he tried to attack and disintegrate the student, forcing them to flee. The man was quiet for a minute. When he finally started speaking, he said, "You're telling me that this kid survived having their head crushed and has multiple other abilities? That they killed with no issue and actually performed cannibalism with witnesses? That they tortured Nomu above the pit they made that had a black hole also made by said student in said pit?" 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 confirmed, and the man made a profile appear on the screen asking, "Is this that student?" 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 confirmed it again as the man spoke, "Interesting, no quirk information available. That means that it's a powerful quirk they are trying to hide from others. If it's that important that even his medical records before UA say they are quirkless, then it must be a extremely powerful quirk. I must have it." 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 asked what they were going to do about Shigaraki and the man sighed before replying, "I'll bring him to me and heal his arm." The still miming and now crying in pain Shigaraki started coughing up some gray sludge that enveloped his body before it shrank and disappeared, with Shigaraki being taken to an unknown location presumably to get his arm. Back at the USJ Izuku's POV. I woke up to pain all over. I was still under the sunlight which was burning me but less than before. I bolted up feeling blood and oil in my throat which I coughed up onto the floor, watching it burn and evaporate in the sunlight before I glitched to the nearest spot that was covered with shade, making me sigh in relief as I sat down, and pain shot up my spine making me shift on the spot until I wasn't in pain. I looked around seeing the staff and students blocked off from me by my sister who was standing near me between the others and me pointing her absolute solver at them. I was seeing them in multiple versions besides my normal standard vision, X-ray, thermal, night, you name it I could see with it. I coughed and called for my sister who quickly made her way to me, kneeling next to me. She asked, "Izu, are you all right?" I nodded and asked what happened as everything was fuzzy. She sighed and glanced at something above me before apologizing and slapping me. My vision was filled with a reboot screen before everything came rushing back to me, making me ask, "What's changed? I know I have different versions of sight now, but what else?" She looked at me and said, "Well, you now have the sensors of a disassembly drone on your head and a constantly displayed tail with teeth that are dripping with nanite acid. Also, you're a little taller now, so congrats, you're now my height little sis." On a less positive note, you might be stuck as female for a while as disassembly drones can't just change their gender, and increasing your safety limit brought you closer to a drone due to the absolute solver taking more root in your personal code. She looked solemn for a second and said she'd explain the rest later. I went to ask why later but was cut off as the staff walked over and asked if I was fine, making me respond sarcastically, "Oh, just brilliant. Burning in sunlight is just brilliant when I'm on a planet in a country that's pretty much always got the sun beating down on me literally. Do you know what burning alive is like? To feel your skin melt and blister before healing and repeating as your circuits scream at you to get out of the light. Because I do." They looked taken aback at my sarcastic outburst before I got an idea and shouted, "Yayorozu. I need a large umbrella to block the sun, stat." She jumped at me shouting her name and quickly understood why I needed it before making the umbrella and handing it to me. I used my solver to open it and hold it above me as I went back to the bus, ignoring everyone's shouts as my sister walked next to me and started talking. "You know you're gonna have to build a resistance to sunlight." I sighed and nodded. Once I got outside, I saw the police rounding up and putting the cork-cuffed villains into the back of police vans with the help of ectoplasm clones. One vehicle that was out of place was the black SUV with tinted windows. As I approached the bus with 𝗬𝗏, a man in a black suit with black sunglasses and slicked back hair stepped out of the SUV and approached us. He stepped in front of us and said, 𝗧𝗜𝗍𝗘, you are required to report to the HSPC headquarters under orders from the MDM president herself. We want you to join their hero program where you will be given unique opportunities and specialized training. I looked him up and down before scoffing and saying, "Pass." I went to walk around him, but he grabbed my arm and said, "It wasn't a request." He tried to steer me towards the SUV, but I made my new tail that burned under the sunlight, making me hiss in pain as I grabbed his arm tightly with the nanite acid-dripping teeth of my tail's mouth, making him stop and turn towards me, hissing in pain as the acid ate through his arm slowly to say something, but I cut him off. "I am in a very pissy mood right now. I won't be going anywhere with you, and if you want to keep your arm unbroken or attached to your body, you will let go of me immediately." He looked at me for a moment before deciding to try and pull me to his SUV. "Hey," I warned him, "what happens next is his own fault." I snapped the mouth of my tail shut completely, resulting in a squelching and cracking noise as my tail's needle-like teeth sliced through his arm, severing it. He then screamed in pain as he held the stump that was still bleeding and dripping the remnants of my leftover neon green acid that hissed when they touched the ground. I dropped the arm of the man and walked onto the bus after I said to his kneeling form, "Tell your MDM president that the next time I see one of you heirs, they'll lose more than an arm, understand?" He nodded and I boarded the bus, sitting at the back where there was the most shade as 𝐶𝐮 used her absolute solver to shut the curtains on the window. I waited for the rest of the class talking to 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐸𝐸 about my changes, and she advised me to do a full check of my body when I get the chance and to run a full diagnostics check on my code to see if anything else was affected. On the bus outside the USJ 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗘 POV. I was still sat at the back of the bus as the police interviewed the students. I was currently doing a system check of my code and my body's new additions to make sure they were fully synchronized with me. While looking at my tail's programming, I found it had a base level AI. Nothing as advanced as a regular drone, but it has the ability to assess the situation and my emotions to react accordingly. On another note, I found the eyes on my tail can be used to show me what it sees, but it was disabled currently. So naturally, being curious, I turned it on and a new screen appeared in my vision, grouped on the side of my peripheral vision along with the other versions of sight I had. I focused on it and the tail's vision became my own as I moved my tail around my body to observe myself after the changes, and the only noticeable changes were my 5 new sensors that were glowing toxic neon green and were sat neatly on my head. I cycled through each new type of optic calibration I had now, and a few were cool like X-ray and thermal. A couple like sonic vision and night vision would need testing at a later date, as the bus wasn't exactly noisy enough for sonic vision to properly function and it wasn't dark enough for night vision, so when I changed to each of them. Finally, there was electromagnetic vision, which was just a blinding array of colors that made me feel like I was on mushrooms, acid and LSD all at once. However, it made everything stand out from each other no matter how well they blended in against something. The stains on bus seats were a different color from the material of said seats. I looked down at myself and saw that parts of me were glowing differently to the rest. I concluded that it must be the microscopic amounts of BLD and oil I either spilled, coughed up, or got on me from the mass hunt that just happened. Neat. I've got optical augments to make hunts a lot easier. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, who sat next to me, rolled her eyes as she spoke. Of course they'll make hunts easier. You're part disassembly drone now, and they were built and designed by the solvers AI to hunt drones. Each vision served a purpose. Night vision because they couldn't hunt during the day, thermal vision because no matter what, worker drones produced a very small amount of heat that contrasted to the cold landscape of Copper 9, whereas on this planet, in this continent, you're cold as ice. X-ray vision to see into buildings to save time searching each floor. Sonic vision for maze-like areas to single in on a core beat, and the electromagnetic vision was used to track any oil trails that were invisible to the naked optic. She explained in a semi-long rant. It made sense why the disassembly drones had these specific optic augments, as it made them amazing hunters. I nodded at her to show I was listening before she asked, "Anyway, Did you find anything else out while checking your system before playing with your tail and optic augments? I nodded again and she looked at me expectantly, making me sigh as I raised my left hands and demonstrated making my drone right hand change to 4 long standard issue disassembly drone claws that replaced my drone hand's normal 3 fingers and 1 thumb. I spoke, grabbing my sister's attention. I can do this with both my drone hands now. I also found I have 2 empty slots on each hand, so I can equip 4 more weapons or recreational tools. She looked at me and took my still claw hand in her own, creating a dull sensation of touch as she asked, "How does it feel? Can you still use the solver when your hand is like that as well?" I tried to make an absolute solver symbol on my claw hand, but it wouldn't respond. I couldn't feel the normal jolt of energy in my hand before it activated, making me test it with my normal hand, which worked and summoned the neon green symbol I'm used to as I responded to her questions. It feels like any of my extra limbs. A dull sensation of touch to grasp and understand what I'm touching, but nothing in depth like my normal hands. And as for using the absolute solver with a transformed hand, nothing, zilch, nada. I think it might be due to lack of sensory processors in the claws, which means I can't activate the usual feeling that brings up the absolute solver because they were designed to slice through metal, and doing that with my regular hands would be painful as hell. She agreed with my theory, and I turned to her saying, "I'm gonna do a deep dive into my code to find anything else that's not physical that might have changed. If anyone comes on the bus for me, tell them to go screw themselves." My sister smiled sadistically at me and nodded. I pulled myself into my code, watching thousands of neon green text windows fly by me as the occasional absolute solver orange whizzed by me, getting more and more frequent as I dived deeper into my personal code. I finally found my updated and old self-ID code that was a mix of green and yellow as it glowed. I grabbed it and opened the folder, watching it display to compare them side by side. A/N. Regular code text is green. Bold code text is orange to show the absolute solver's involvement in Izuku's code for this segment / personal information / name. 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗘 clearance level. Administrator privileges granted by Administrator 𝗛𝗕𝐿𝐼𝐻 /gender N/A////age 14 // system version worker drone v2 8 / date saved XX/XX/20XX / personal information / name 𝗧𝗜𝗓𝗧𝗓 clearance level. Administrator privileges granted by Administrator 𝗛𝗕𝐿𝐼𝐻 // gender female // age 14 // system version disassembly drone v3 4 / date updated and saved XX/XX/20XX / great. The absolute solver has edited my profile. I tried to edit my profile, but it wouldn't let me change anything without bringing up multiple error windows, making me sigh in frustration. I tried to change it a few more times, making no progress. It doesn't make any sense considering the fact I'm trying to edit something in my own personal files. Even the error messages aren't making sense. They're just jumbled letters and numbers which I tried to rearrange thousands of different ways or put them through different cipher decryption programs, but nothing ever came of my efforts. I screamed to the void of empty space filled with floating files and lines of green, yellow, and orange in frustration as I said, "Fine, I give up, damn it. Let's just see how far the absolute solver has rooted itself in our systems." I thought of mine and my sister's neural network systems and was pulled through the inky blackness to our neural network systems. Picture it in neon green with neon yellow and orange on the outer edges, while the center is a mix of yellow and green. The first was standing in front of mine and my sister's neural network, which made me look like an ant in front of a person, and muttered to myself after floating through and closely examining my systems, "It seems that the absolute solver hasn't made it to our core personality yet. That's good. But it's still rooted itself in more than our energy output functions, which is bad." I focused on some of the spinning rims around the core of our neural network and started to spin them faster and faster, overclocking them till they were a blur, using them to cut off and destroy any unauthorized code that attempted to breach the core personality and consciousness code. I then used some of the useless midsection background software as a barrier between the core and infected area of the shared systems, severing as many connection points as I could without damaging our systems, and rerouting some that couldn't be severed from the infected areas to delay its future progression. I got a sudden ping from the core. It was a message, was yellow, meaning it's from my sister, asking what I was doing as it was causing her hologram to glitch, making me think, SHT. She can likely feel the changes and rearrangements I'm making to our system code. I pulled up a text window and typed that I'd explain later when I was out of the core and we could actually talk, before I flicked it towards her part of the core. I sighed as I spoke to myself. That's the best I can do to slow the progression of the absolute solver without damaging our systems. I shook my head, stretching my arms out before slamming my hands together, bringing the entire neural network down to the size of a baseball before I checked it over from an outside perspective and tossing it back into the void after finding nothing else wrong with our systems. I brought up a wake-up protocol window and activated it. I was suddenly thrown back into reality, making my formerly limp body jerk up straight as I blinked and took in my surroundings. I was still sat on the back of the bus. However, Bakugo was shouting and ranting at 𝗧𝗜𝗍𝗏, who was stood defensively between me and him, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. My audio sensors must still be rebooting. I took a quick glance around and saw that a few other classmates were sitting in the bus with their heads turned towards 𝗬𝗏 and Bakugo when my audio sensors finally rebooted and I heard what my sister was arguing with Baku bastard about. I told you already, I will never allow you to use the solver. Even if I wanted to give you access, I can't. You can't even use it to begin with, you dumbass explosive Pomeranian. You need to be inorganic and a drone, as it is a program, not a quirk. Was this BS'er really trying to take the absolute solver for himself? I got the answer to my rhetorical question when he shouted back, I don't care. I deserve that power more than the useless Deku, you dumb slut. I'm gonna be the #1 hero, therefore that power should be mine. Give it to me before I blow you and to hell, you monsters. The tension was palpable as I bolted upright and grabbed the BS'er's arm that was suddenly pointing at us with my tail when he went to set his quirk off at us, resulting in him screaming in pain as the acid from my tail ate through his gauntlet and dripping onto his arm underneath. I stared straight into his eyes, the shadows created by the closed curtains giving my glowing eyes and face a sinister look as I spoke. You really want the absolute solver? Too bad. It's not yours to use. You called 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 a slut again. What happened last time you did that? I'm pretty sure I said I'd break you in half if you called her that again. I did warn you and let it slide when you did it again in the battle training, so it's your own fault. I used my tail to hold him in the air near the roof of the bus as I made a claw that grabbed his leg before I started pulling in different directions. The rest of the class that was sat on the bus were watching in horror, too scared to stop me, as Bakugo was screaming in agony on the verge of torn in half when 𝗧𝗱 ran onto the bus and half screamed, Izuku. Stop right now or you will be arrested. I ignored him and gave him a cold response saying, I don't care, I'm annoyed right now, and he tried to harm me and my sister after being denied access to the absolute solver. I kept slowly pulling, resulting in louder screams of pain and a series of pops from his spine being stretched. 𝗧𝗱 stated to run towards us when I dropped a still intact Bakugo staring off into a seemingly random direction. Another drone just pinged an extremely weak message. My head snapped towards my sister as we stared at each other wide-eyed before I suddenly said, You got that as well, right? She nodded and went to say something when Bakugo shakily got up and went to attack us in a blind fury. He got a very familiar scarf wrapped around him before being violently tugged backwards by 𝗧𝗱, ordered me saying, Outside, right now. I ignored 𝗧𝗱 and Bakubich before I glitched outside with 𝗧𝗏 and started hissing in pain as the sunlight burned me. I was on the verge of crying from pain, forgetting in a moment of shock from getting another drone's message that I wasn't immune to sunlight anymore. I was staring up at the sky, trying not to cry out from pain as my skin/exposed chassis kept blistering and melting. I was trying to locate a satellite I could use to boost the signal, ignoring the pain. 𝗧𝗱 got off the bus with the rest of the students looking through the windows or looking at him, with the staff approaching me from where they were being interviewed by the police. He looked mad, but I couldn't care less right now. As he got close to my still burning form, he halted for a second, looking at me with slight concern mixed with anger. He started to shout further, increasing the amount of onlookers. Izuku. You can't just kill someone because they threatened you. You should have informed one of us. You may have leeway, but don't test how far you see. I cut him off, still staring at the sky in pain with a half-butted, yeah, I understand. I've got to go do something right now that's more important. Go back without us. See you at you. I sprouted a pair of wings that started to burn with the rest of me as I blasted into the sky, with 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐸𝐴 getting dragged alongside me after I found a strong enough satellite. I broke the atmosphere of the Earth and floated around trying to spot the required satellite before pulling it towards me and 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐴 as my sister hijacked its signal receiver. I noticed I stopped burning as bad and asked him why, to which she simply said through our core as she gave me a deadpanned look, "Sister, just think about it. We're in space, the vacuum of space where it's well beyond freezing. The only way something burns here is if something combustible is set alight with a spark. Therefore, to answer your question, it's simply too cold for you burn. You might blister and melt a little, but nothing like when you're on Earth. Anyway, what were you doing to our neural network systems? I felt you were rearranging some of the code and severing some connection points." In response to her deadpanned look, I face-bombed and thought to myself, of course, I'm an idiot. Oh, and to explain what I was doing, the absolute solver has taken a bit more of a root in our systems, so I just rearranged some of the way our code is shaped to slow its progression in the future. Nothing was permanently severed, a few things were rerouted, but nothing major. She nodded and said it's fine, and she would look it over tonight to make sure everything could function correctly without creating a backlog on our subsystems which would pile up and cause us to crash. I turned my attention back to the satellite as we used it to enhance the mystery drone's message. It wasn't strong enough to receive the whole message, but we got the point as the screen on the side of the satellite said ///SIG and L received. I finally found %#boss on WhatIf at #worry. // I looked at my sister as she spoke through our bond. It must be J, no one else calls me boss. I was staring at my sister as I said back, but how did she find us? 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐴 looked at me as she let out an inaudible sigh and said, when I said they'd be consequences to increasing our safety limit, this was possible. I had to increase the limit amount by letting the solver into more of our systems, which in turn increased the signal we give off as solver admins. I wonder how long it's been for her. I let out a silent scream into the void as I said to 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐴, we can't have her come here. Who knows how 𝗂𝐴 would react? Not to mention she knows way too much about your past and could accidentally slip up telling someone too much. 𝐒𝐮𝐴 nodded in agreement before she told me, look, how is she even going to get here? We are literally in another universe, and if my memory banks aren't corrupted, which they aren't, you have seen I destroyed the ship we came to copper 9 inches. If she does find a way, we can't stop her from coming, since we can't produce a signal strong enough to breach the barrier between universes that can get a full message through. Quite frankly, I'm surprised Jay managed to do it at all, but my old world had more technological advances due to no quirks, so she could have found somewhere to scrape together something that could send a message after boosting the signal enough to get to us. I shook my head and decided not to think about it, saying to 𝐒𝐮𝐴, let's just get back to you. I'm sure the staff in our class will have questions about what we did and want more information from us if school hasn't finished by the time we get back. She sighed another inaudible breath and responded, great, another interrogation before we go through more of my upsetting memories. Just what we need. I agreed with her annoyance at the situation as we let go of the satellite and pushed it back into the empty vastness of space, watching it drift away for a moment before looking for Japan. Once we spotted Japan and began our re-entry into the atmosphere, not caring about the pain of starting to melt and burn from the sunlight mixed with the atmosphere that comes with re-entry, as I've gotten somewhat used to it now. It's gonna take a couple days to a week of constant exposure to build my tolerance for sunlight back up. Just great, a week of constant burning at most. I thought to myself in annoyance. Meanwhile, in an unmarked building in an unknown location, RD person POV. We see an agent in a black suit with slicked back hair and a missing arm with bandages soaking in BLD around the stump walking through a white hallway. He walked past two similarly dressed agents and entered a room with a woman in a gray suit with slicked back blonde hair sat behind a desk typing away on a computer. She glanced at him before doing a double take and staring in barely masked shock at the agent's arm. Agent 47, what happened to your arm? And where is the target I sent you to collect? The agent stood up straight after he bowed to the woman saying, I'm sorry, Madam President, the target refused to come with me. When I attempted to apprehend them, they used a tail with a form of eel-like head to bite my arm off using raw jaw strength and some sort of green acid that was leaking from the mouth of the tail's head. They then warned me that if they saw anyone from the HSPC approach them, they would do a lot worse than the injuries they've inflicted upon me. The woman, now known as the president of the HSPC, sighed as she leant back in her chair, staying quiet for a moment before speaking up. Get me our eyes in the sky and tell him I want to meet with him. In the meantime, keep a covert ground-based surveillance on the target. We need to find their dirty secrets so we can own them. Is that understood? The agent nodded before he pulled out a phone and left the room, leaving the president by herself. The woman was leaning back in her chair as she was looking at a screenshot from a drone of both the USJ and the entrance exam. They both had 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗘 using a large 𝗔𝗨. She spun around to the wall of windows that had a view of Tokyo as she was thinking aloud, we need to get the child into our hero program. Once they sign the contract, they can't go against it without becoming public enemy number one. The power they displayed at both the UA entrance exam and earlier at the USJ is too valuable and unpredictable to be left unchecked. We just need to find some dirt we can hold over them. It's only a matter of time before we find something. No one who has that type of quirk has clean hands. She kept looking over the city in her own world when her phone went off. She looked at it and picked it up, putting it on speaker as she spun round to face her computer before talking. Hello, Agent Hawks. I've got an assignment for you. It's of the highest importance this mission is successful. The person on the phone, known as Hawks, responded in a somewhat jokey yet serious tone. Hello, Madam President. What's the assignment that requires my attention? Need some loose ends tied up. The president sighed as she spoke in a firm tone. Nothing like that. A candidate for our exclusive hero program has turned up. We need you to keep an eye on them and gather any information you can. The candidate in question is called 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗘, metallic green hair. They are capable of being either gender, 5 feet 4 inches, looks like a rotting corpse with a robotic body visible under missing patches of skin. They are currently a student at UA in the hero course. Offer them an internship and get them to join our hero program. Understood, Agent. The woman sent the file of Izuku to Hawks when he asked after a couple minutes of silence, presumably reading through the file. Why this kid? Aren't they too old for the program? They wouldn't be able to develop the skills or capacity to get certain jobs done now that their core personality has formed a foundation, and if they're in the hero program of UA, they clearly want to be like All Might. That's what UA is known for after all. The woman sighed as she pinched the bridge of her nose as she responded to the questions and the statement, saying, I'm sending you the video of the kids' UA practical entrance exam and their lesson earlier today at the USJ. I believe you'll find your answers in the videos. Now get the mission done. I want you to case the kid, find something we can use to force his hand into accepting and signing a contract with us by any means necessary, as long as the kid doesn't know it's me you're working for. Offering a paid internship, a visit to UA to look at the up-and-coming heroes, putting in a word to get their provisional license early. I don't care as long as you complete the mission without mentioning the HSPC. She hung up and sent the videos to him before continuing her work typing away on her computer. Back with 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗘𝗧𝗔𝗍𝗧𝗔𝗍𝗧𝗔 Izuku's POV, me and 𝐒𝐮𝐴 just broke the final cloud layer and the city and UA are in clear view. School has ended and the students are starting to filter out of UA. I spotted a certain feather-headed classmate and decided to get some answers. I reoriented myself as my sister cut her hologram off so I could focus on the objective and landed on the green near the gate, kicking up a cloud of dust which momentarily blocked the sunlight from burning me. I switched to my newly acquired thermal vision to see through the cloud and spotted the thermal signature shaped like person with a bird-shaped head. I glitched next to him, hissing at the pain of starting to burn, and grabbed him before pulling ourselves into the shade produced by the wall around you, throwing him off balance at the speeds I dragged him through. He turned away and bent over before he started throwing up onto the floor, while his slightly larger and more intimidating than usual quirk patted his back as the other students looked at the empty crater I made with my landing. When Tokoyami stopped on and off throwing up after a couple minutes, he took a deep breath and stood up straight, looking at me before bowing and saying, Dark unholy Lady Izuku, why did you pull me here if I have permission to ask? I leant against the wall further, avoiding the light as I sighed and said, Tokoyami, you can call me Izuku, I'm a student and your classmate. And I pulled you here to avoid the sunlight burning me and to ask something. My sister reappeared next to me wanting to hear the answer in person. He looked somewhat stunned at my response before asking, "Hello Dark Lady 𝐶𝐮𝐸𝐴, very well Lady Izuku, what was it you wanted to ask?" I went to speak when 𝐶𝐮𝐸𝐴 cut me off getting impatient. "Look, we just need to know where you got that branded pen you write in your journal with. Did someone give it to you? Did you find it randomly? Or was it just something you got online or in a random shop?" Tokoyami looked at us curiously, pulling out the pen with J.C. Jensen branded on the side, asking if this was what we were talking about. We confirmed that was the pen we were interested in. He stated that he got it a week ago when he was worshipping us at a shrine he built in his room, and it just appeared on the shrine where his offering once was. I looked at my sister with a straight face, silently asking if he was serious, to which I got a response in the form of her shrugging her shoulders, showing she wasn't sure either. I looked back at the bird-headed student and asked, "Can you be more specific? Was there a certain thing you were doing or saying before you got the pen? Be specific." He nodded and started saying, "It was last Friday. We just witnessed your fight against Bakugo and got home deciding to create a shrine in your honor. That symbol you repeatedly summon when you use your powers were carved into the stone of the shrine. Seeing that you bleed blood and a black substance, I figured since you've got a robotic-style body the black substance was oil. On the way home we grabbed a small can of motor oil as something to sacrifice to you. As a tribute of devotion I placed a BLD pack filled with my own BLD and the oil I bought on the symbol I carved. After I did some chanting in Latin and some old binary code celebrating your glory, a black hole with the word no you make appeared, but it was purple instead of green or yellow appeared before it imploded, eating the BLD and oil I was sacrificing and leaving the pen where my offerings once were. I presumed it was a gift from you two and have been writing in my journal about my findings about you two with it exclusively." Me and 𝐶𝐮𝐸𝐴 looked at each other before my sister quickly asked, "Purple? You are absolutely sure the null was purple?" He nodded as me and 𝐶𝐮𝐸𝐴 had a mental conversation about how 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟 or Nori can interact with this world. We decided that it must be the nullus. They must act as gateways between the two worlds. They are simulated black holes, and not a lot of is known about black holes in general, therefore it's possible, it's the only explanation. I looked at Tokoyami and said thanks for the information and that I'll see him on Monday before taking a breath and hissing in pain as I stepped into the setting sunlight, thinking, sunsets are going to be painful for the next few days. I speed walked through the still leaving students out of need to increase my sunlight tolerance, burning and sizzling under the sunlight, which attracted attention and curious glances as I walked by them. I made it into UA and bolted to a bit of shade, letting my skin and chassis heal before I made my way through the school to the 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 office, glitching through the hallways trying to avoid as much exposure to the light as possible. 𝐶𝐮𝐸𝐴 giggled at my struggles, finding it funny and saying, "I warned you there'd be consequences to increasing the safety limit," I grumbled out through our core. Yeah, it was that or have my body rip itself apart, so not much room for another plan. Once I made it to the office door, I ripped it open, not bothering to knock, and darted into the room, noticing the windows had all the blinds down, making me sigh in relief as I sat in a chair, sagging down on the spot at not having to worry about the sunlight. Someone cleared their throat, making me look up and meeting 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 eyes. He was sat at his desk with 𝗧𝗱𝗏, 13, all might and recovery girl there. 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗏 was the first to speak up, saying, "Ms. Elliott, I hope you're all right. I closed the blinds for your comfort." I told him I was fine as long as I was out of the sunlight and thanked him for closing the blinds. Next was 𝗧𝗱𝗏, who was close to snapping at me. "Izuku, not only did you attack another student and was on the verge of seriously hurting them, but you ignored me when I tried to confront you about it before taking off to God knows where. I demand answers." I sighed and leant back in my chair as I told him, I got part of an impossible message from 𝐶𝐮𝐸𝐴's former colleague that took precedence over everything else. I needed something to boost my signal, so I found somewhere to boost the signal strength to receive more of the message. He asked me why I attacked Bakugo when I should have gotten one of the staff, to which I replied with, "He insulted my sister and went to attack us after 𝐶𝐮𝐸𝐴 refused him access to the absolute solver." 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗏 perked up and cut 𝗧𝗱𝗏 off before he could speak, suddenly asking with a sudden amount of curiosity, "You can share the absolute solver with others and allow them to use it?" 𝐶𝐮𝐸𝐴 appeared next to me and rolled her eyes, saying, "Listen, we can't share the solver, and even if we wanted to, which we don't. It's a program, therefore you need to be I. Not to mention the solver isn't just a simple program, it's also a high-level AI that attempts to corrupt and possess its hosts. Look at what happened to my sister when I had to allow it more access into our systems. She now has to temporarily avoid sunlight or risk burning to death. If it gets control of a host, it will attempt to follow its primary objective. 𝗔𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘 put a paw on his snout and sighed before asking, "What is its primary objective?" I spoke up saying, "That isn't your concern. Now let's move on." 𝗔𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘 sighed as he indicated to Recovery Girl, allowing her to talk. "After that scene in the USJ, I need to do a full medical evaluation on you." I adamantly refused it, but 𝗔𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘 said if I didn't, then I wouldn't be allowed to attend any future hero practical lessons, as they wouldn't know the condition of my physical well-being. I sighed and tried to bargain with him by saying, "I don't trust her or any doctor. But fine. However, if she can't even find my pulse, then I don't need to do the rest of the examination." He agreed to it, and Recovery Girl approached me, making me eye her up and down as I tensed up a little. She held her hand out and I gave her my wrist. She started putting her fingers on my flesh wrist and then my drone wrist, looking more and more confused. She stated in shock, "You're ice cold and I can't find your pulse. How are you alive?" I looked at Recovery Girl with a deadpan stare as I told her, "I'm not human anymore, I gave it up. Therefore you or any doctor on this planet isn't qualified to give me a medical examination." She stepped back and started ranting, "If you're not human, then why did you throw up BLD and that black substance? If you're no longer human, then why do you bleed human BLD, and what is that black stuff anyway? I can't get a sample of it to analyze, it just burns on contact with the air with your BLD." I sighed and just tugged on my skin a little as I said, "See this? This was my skin when I was human. It still has BLD vessels in it, and my chassis still has some while slightly altered human organs like my stomach. Technically, if you want to get specific, I'm a robot that's wearing a still somewhat living skin suit." That last sentence made a few of the staff present, except for 𝗔𝗧𝗟𝗃, who didn't react at all, recoil in disgust. 𝗧𝗱𝗃 broke the silence by sighing and saying, "Look, can we just get this meeting back on track before anything else highly disturbing is said?" 𝗔𝗧𝗟𝗃 nodded and proceeded to try interrogate me over every little thing. In response, I sighed and just made a few hologram projectors before playing the memory of everything from the second I walked into the USJ to the second I got on the bus, leaving out the part between eating the 𝗔𝗨𝗧𝗟𝗘 to the getting 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗟𝗧𝗏 to make me an umbrella temporarily. The only other part that was missing from the memory was when the 𝗏𝗼 obliterated my head and died. Since I couldn't see or hear, therefore I couldn't simulate a world I couldn't register, so the simulated environment turned into a void until I healed and everything started playing as normal. Once the memory was over, 𝗔𝗧𝗟𝗃 asked, "Okay, that saves us playing a game for 21 questions. The ringleader, from what I can tell, is someone who never had a form of quirk therapy, possible late teenager or a young adult, likely unintelligent as he acts like a child, showing a clear lack of emotional maturity and spouts out important information in fits of high emotion, spoilt as well, and has a sense of entitlement. Moving on to something more serious, the biological weapon designed to kill all might. After a BLD analysis, it seems the ringleader Tamura Shigaraki said about this 𝗏𝗼 having multiple quirks were correct, as it seems unlikely that Shigaraki lacks the personality or intelligence to create something like that. Therefore he must be working for someone behind the scenes. From what I could tell, it seems like 𝗔𝗧𝗟𝗃 might have an idea of who Shigaraki is working for but refuses to say it. Before I could say anything, 𝗔𝗧𝗟𝗃 spoke up again with a curious glint in his eyes. "Anyway, enough with my ramblings. I noticed you have 5 green beads on your head and are now displaying a tail that is practically foaming at its mouth with green liquid after you passed out at these before waking up and darting to the shade of a collapsed building as you were burning under the sunlight. Care to explain what they are and if there's anything else we need to be aware of?" I narrowed my eyes and had a silent conversation with my sister on if I should tell them. We ultimately decided that there's no harm in it, but we wouldn't give them anything too in-depth. I began by saying, yes, they would be considered partial drawbacks from increasing my absolute solver limits, however they can be used for hero work. The beads on my eyes are actually sensors that each act as an extra form of vision, allowing me to see in different ways that the naked eye can't. The tail is just a tail, The only thing special about it is the teeth are coated in something called nanite acid, with the only neutralizing agent being my saliva. As for anything else, I have retractable claws for my mechanical-based hands now and have 2 more slots on each hand for weapons or recreational tools. That reminds me. Is 𝗚𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 still here or has she gone home? 𝗔𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 asked me to demonstrate my claws, making me sigh as I swapped out my left hand, making a few of the teachers jump back as All Might asked, what purpose could they serve in the line of hero work, young Elliot? I rolled my eyes as I said, as if it should be obvious as I held my claws up, these aren't for hero purposes, they're for hunts. But if you really want a purpose outside of that, intimidating a villain or getting through rubble to large to move with my absolute solver. The last part about the rubble was a partial lie. The absolute solver can move just about anything with ease. 𝗔𝗎𝗓 asked if there was anything else that needed to be discussed, and I responded there wasn't. He dismissed me after telling me that 𝗚𝗏 was still on site in her class with 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 working on something by herself before I left the room via glitching back to my dorm room to get out of my hero outfit before I made way to support department, trying to avoid the fading sunlight. I was glitching from shadow to shadow and speed walking when there wasn't a shadow I could take advantage of. I needed to build a tolerance to sunlight, and this was the best way to achieve it without burning to death. Eventually, after a CYCL dodging, burning, and healing, I made it to the support department and entered the room to see 𝗚𝗏 keeping 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 away as she was making a bulky but ion engine. 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 kept trying to approach mine and my sister's partner, presumably to find out how the engine works. I cleared my throat, gaining the attention of both student and teacher as they turned to me. 𝗚𝗏's eyes practically lit up as she came over and greeted me saying, "Izuku. Those blueprints for the babies you and your sister gave me were almost impossible to follow with the amount of detail in them. I can see why you needed an expert engineer extraordinaire to help you with them. Come, I've been working on this engine prototype all week and you've come just in time to see its initial testing run." Looks like she didn't even notice my slightly altered appearance as she grabbed my arm and dragged me over to the side of the engine and shooed away a still curious 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘. She picked up a control box before flipping down a welding mask, making 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 cover his eyes in a rush as 𝗚𝗏 pushed the throttle of the engine to the max, making it make a whirling noise as it hissed to life and started to shake violently. I ripped the control panel away from 𝗚𝗏, ignoring her cries of annoyance, and lowered it to 10% output. As I slowly raised the output, the engine stabilized and started to hum in contentment at my treatment of it. It was producing a steady and powerful stream of purple with a layer of deep blue around the outer edges. I got the engine to 56% before it started to shake and cut out after something inside it must have short-circuited. She took off the mask as 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 stared in shock at what 𝗚𝗏 made. I put the control panel down and turned to 𝗚𝗏's pouting face as she asked why I took the controls from her. In response, I said, "This isn't like most engines where you can give it everything at once, 𝗚𝗏. With an ion engine you have to ease into it and let it pick up its power gradually, or it blows itself apart because you overload it all at once." She nodded and wrote what I said down as 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 came up to me asking, "Miss 𝗏𝗧𝗒𝗡 hasn't let me look at the engine. Do you know why?" Every time I've asked, she said it's part of the contract and that she's too busy to explain. I told him that anything 𝗚𝗏 builds for me or with blueprints for me is patented property of 𝗚𝗏, me and 𝗬𝗏, and to trying to copy or find out how it works is a violation of the law, which made him leave the engine alone. Once 𝗚𝗏 was done writing down what I presumed was notes about the engine prototype's performance and possible improvements for the next model, she turned to me and asked, "Now that the test is done, what can I do for you, partner? Need something building or just here for some basic costume maintenance?" I told her that I recently went through some upgrades and have 4 empty equipment slots, so I wanted to commission a couple things to be built. She asked what sort of upgrades I got, with stars in her eyes as she appeared in front of me. I looked at my tail, which looked back at me as 𝗚𝗏 was still oblivious to it. I felt my sister practically facepalm through our core. 𝗚𝗏 was still oblivious as I pointed at my tail. She looked at the eel-like head with green glowing eyes for a few minutes as it stared back at her before it finally clicked, and she finally jumped back in shock, saying, "When the F did you get a tail?" I told her, I already said I got a few upgrades. Besides, I always had the option of having a tail, but due to villains' infiltration of the USJ, which lead to a fight today, I ended up with a permanent tail, some new sensors, and these with 2 spare slots on each arm. I activated my claws, making May light up as she watched my hands get pulled into my arm before my claws are deployed. She held my claws in her hand as she spoke. So you have built-in weapon slots like a game character with different attack slots. I sighed as I spoke. Why are there so many video game references today? First the man-child of a villain and now you. But yes, I just want 2 things built so I have an extra weapon in each arm. She pulled out a notepad and asked, what is it you needed building, and are there any limits on the size, weight or materials you can store/redeploy? I told her that as long as the size, weight and materials weren't too large or complex it's fine. I then told her I wanted one of her MP guns in pure black with green highlights which made 𝗧𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗧, who was eavesdropping, pale. May nodded and asked what the other device I wanted was, so I gave her blueprint I prepared for her which depicted Jay's EMP, but this one doubled as a siren and flashbang to disorient and stun villains, as well as the EMP's base functions to take out villain tech-based support gear and any devices they may have. She slowed her writing and looked up from the blueprint I handed to her, staring at me before saying, you know the materials here aren't provided under UA's support course. The materials alone are worth hundreds of thousands to get legally. The fabrication of the baby would also cost a lot. I sighed and quickly hacked some giant shady offshore bank account that had hundreds of millions of pounds in it under the name Power Merchant and split it up, randomly transferring each sum of money through 180 different bank accounts to create an annoyingly long paper trail before depositing all the money into May's bank account before saying, and now you're worth more. A/N. I'm British, so I use pounds as currency. She looked confused before checking a few notifications on her phone. I watched as her eyes threatened to fall out of her head at how wide-eyed she was. She shakily looked up at me from her phone, whispering, How and where did you get this? I told her I simply acquired it from some villain, and to see it as a win, she gets all the money she will ever need for her babies, and she gets to cripple a villain's financial situation. She thought it over before smiling eagerly and accepting what I said as she exclaimed, 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 is at your service, partner. I'll have both of your babies ready by Monday. I looked a little shocked by how fast she could get them both done in 2 days. My curiosity got the better of me as I asked, how can you get both of them done in 2 days? They aren't exactly simple things to get the materials for and make in such a short time frame. She told me that she was working on an improved version of her MP gun on the side all week and that it was almost done so she could focus on the modified EMP. As for the materials, she could now put them on a rush order with the money worth a large fortune I stole and gave her. I nodded at her explanation and told 𝗧𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗧 that we needed to discuss some future business ideas. He got the idea and left in a hurry. Once he left, I broke all the cameras in the room before we started to have a conversation about any future projects and what should be shared with the world and kept between me, her and 𝗬𝗠. She tried to argue that all the technology she makes should be shared with the world. I told her to look at it logically as I said, look at what humanity has done with technological advancements in the past, such as the atomic bomb which America dropped on Japan to make a point. Or how any major technological invention was used for war. When quirks first started to appear in mass, look what happened. She looked like she was struggling to pick a side, so I nudged her in a certain direction after getting my sister's permission for what I was about to offer. How about this? You don't share any devices I say not to, and I'll give you anything that's within in my power. She nodded weakly, agreeing before she asked, can you give me any blueprints to your robot body? I looked at her before saying slowly, I can, but why do you want them? She looked at me with a steeled resolve in her eyes as she spoke. What I'm about to tell you is deeply personal, and I have never told anyone, so if I tell you, will you never tell another person and give me the blueprints? I told her that as long as it isn't a bad reason, I will. She took a breath before she became solemn and poured her heart out to me, saying, ever since I was a little girl, I've wanted to be something more. I despise the fact that I will be blip in human history, that no matter what, even the best of humanity can't compete with time. I want to see it all. I want to witness the birth and death of civilizations. I want to help people, and I see you with all these cool powers that aren't a quirk save people, and it drives me insane. I, who have a quirk, can only help people by sitting in a lab all day and make support babies that everyone takes for granted while I remain behind the scenes. Don't get me wrong, I love making my babies. I want the blueprints so I can try make a new body capable of helping people to put my mind into. I've been making a blanket. Capable of holding a human mind since I deduced what you are. To say both me and my sister were shocked was an understatement. Did she really figure it out? I had to ask, so I did. Oh, and do tell, what am I then? She looked at me with a sure expression. You used to be 100% human, like me. But you became an I presume 𝗧𝗏𝗏 had something to do with it, but I know you're a human turned not a copy of 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘's consciousness but the original 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏. I want to replicate that and become what you are. I shook my head and started to giggle in shock that someone actually figured it out by themselves. 𝗧𝗏𝗏 appeared next to me and was staring at me before she spoke. Me and 𝗧𝗏𝗏 didn't choose to become fused. It was a do or die moment, and for a long time 𝗧𝗏𝗏 was mostly organic before something happened. I offered him the choice to become I. May you have to realize what you are asking for isn't a gradual transition from organic to inorganic. It's an instant change from one body to another. It's not painless either. The initial fusion of me and my sister was beyond anything a human can handle. It would drive you insane if the feeling of being in a body your subconscious doesn't recognize as your own does. May looked like she wanted to cry at the revelation of her possibly not getting what she desires, which was extremely out of character for her, as she weakly said, "So I'm destined to live and die as an unnoticed blip in human history." Great. She let out a choked sob. I knew it was basically impossible for her to get what she wanted due to the core of a drone being a 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗟𝗘 secret, but I sighed and got her attention before speaking. Look, there is a way, but we don't have the blueprint you need to become like us. Not to mention the technology required to make such a thing doesn't exist, so if you get what you want, then you won't be exactly like us, more like a downgraded version. The best we can do is give you a basic idea of what you want, and you'll need to reverse engineer it. She gained a sparkle of hope in her eyes as she asked if I was serious, to which I said, I am, but seriously consider this path. If you take it and become like me and my sister, you will be letting go of your humanity. You will outlive everyone you know and love if you take care of your desired body. She said she understood and that she didn't have family since they kicked her out for causing regular mayhem and explosions with her babies. I felt bad for her, but I was more concerned with what I was about to give her. With some hesitation, I took her phone and silently modified it, ignoring her questions, before sending her a file for a drone core locked behind biometric security, which required her DNA and my permission to access. I handed her phone back to her and told her in a stern voice that left no room for negotiation, on your phone is everything I know about something called a drone core. It stores a drone's and their consciousness. I am trusting you with this to reverse engineer, so keep quiet. This is dangerous technology, but I made a deal with you. Work on this exclusively in private and let me know when you have made some prototypes. Me and 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏 will come and check they work properly before we let one get near you. She was crying with happiness as she suddenly hugged and thanked me endlessly. Once she calmed down, we all sat down together and decided to have some idle conversation. After a while, I left and went back to my dorm to think before going to bed. As me and 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏 were walking back to the dorms, we were having a silent conversation about what just happened, and she asked me, "Are you sure it was wise to give her that?" I responded that it was fine, and if she can't do it, then we delete the file and no harm no foul. But if she succeeds, then we get someone who actually understands our struggles and someone who we can spend time with if the other drones can't get here.